Chapter 42-43. When Ye Tian saw that the person standing behind him was Li Yu, he couldn't help but tremble. He couldn't help but feel shocked. For a moment, he felt that the person standing behind him wasn't a person, but a bottomless abyss. It was as if he would fall into hell if he turned around to look at it. When he looked at Li Yu, especially the latter's eyes, which seemed calm, contained boundless killing intent. It was extremely frightening. Just this killing intent alone could shatter a powerhouse's heart in an instant. At this moment, Li Yu was too frightening. At the same time, Ye Tian faintly felt a dragon's roar reverberating within his body. In his mind, the image of the dragon shepherds appeared once again. The dragon shepherd's veins had already been devoured by the power of the stars and fused into the bloodline of the stars. However, it hadn't disappeared. It just existed in a different form. That instant reaction seemed to be some sort of predestined bond between the dragon shepherds and the demon tamer. It was extremely strange. At this moment, Ye Tian also had some sort of realization, or rather, some sort of faint worry. Perhaps Li Yu would become a formidable opponent in the future. Step back. Li Yu glanced at Ye Tian, clearly surprised. However, he quickly calmed down and said indifferently. At this moment, there seemed to be an aura around him that was even greater than the heavens. Ye Tian regained his composure and nodded. He hugged the unconscious Rui Qianyu and retreated behind Li Yu. High up in the sky, Ming Lishu's expression was incomparably gloomy and cold. His fatal attack had been blocked. He couldn't help but feel puzzled when he saw an unfamiliar face standing below him. As the head of the law enforcement department, his strength could be ranked among the top in the entire Bloodwing Academy. Yet, this person before him had easily blocked his palm, and his aura was not any weaker than his own. However, he didn't recognize this person at all. This was too strange. Furthermore, Li Yu's aura was too terrifying. It actually made him feel like his life was in danger. He never knew that there was such a person hidden within the academy. Could Li Yu be a mysterious powerhouse that Xingguang Muxue had secretly nurtured? Ming Yufeng deserved to die. The aura on his body was extremely yin qi. The reason he could transform into a wolf was because he cultivated the nine-wolf extreme yin art. Ye Tian killed him to get rid of a scourge for the academy, Li Yu said coldly. Her eyes were cold. Nonsense. Ming Lishu frowned and growled. Whether Ming Yufeng cultivates the nine-wolf extreme yin art or not isn't something you can decide with just a few words. If you still don't reveal your identity, don't blame this chief for being ruthless. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying flame rose from his body. The light of the flame set the prairie ablaze, breaking through the heavens and the earth, and spreading in all directions into a sea of fire. At this moment, Ming Lishu's Sky Martial Saint Ancestor aura was fully displayed. What a powerful aura! Everyone felt the scorching aura, and they all retreated in shock. However, Li Yu was not afraid at all. His expression did not even change as he said, "My name is Li Yu. I'm a teacher in the academy and I'm in charge of guarding the life and death hunting ground. Just now, in the hunting grounds of life and death, I caught an academy criminal from more than 30 years ago. A clone of Wolf Demon White Demon." White Demon! Hearing this name, the crowd could not help but exclaim. Although the incident with White Demon had happened more than 30 years ago, because it was too bloody, it had caused quite a stir back then, so many people knew this name. Now that they heard about White Demon, how could they not be shocked? When Ming Lishu heard the name White Demon, he could not help but frown, and his expression changed. For the past 30 years, White Demon has not left the Bloodwings. He has been hiding in the life and death hunting ground. Li Yu's eyes were dark as he said loudly, "Not long ago, Ye Tian and Zhu Shi entered the life and death hunting ground and killed White Demon. However, Zhu Shi was unfortunately hit by White Demon. He was hit by the latter's nine-wolf soul-stealing curse and is now in grave danger." Ming Lishu frowned and roared, "Li Yu, Does what you said have anything to do with the matter in front of us? He obviously did not want Li Yu to continue speaking. Of course it does. Li Yu's face was cold as he said, before Nie Tian entered the life and death hunting ground, he was hit by Ming Yufeng's Nine-Wolf Extreme Yin Curse and almost died. Zhu Shi's Nine-Wolf Soul Stealing Curse just so happens to need a martial artist who cultivates the Nine-Wolf Extreme Yin Curse. Only the blood energy of a martial artist can save him. Enough. Ming Lishu's eyes were filled with rage as he roared. You keep saying that Yufeng cultivates the Nine-Wolf Extreme Yin Curse, but do you have any proof? How would I know that you did not collude with Nie Tian to slander Ming Yufeng? Humph. I think you know better than anyone what kind of trash Ming Yufeng is. Li Yu's eyes darkened as he rebuked coldly. What do you mean by that? Ming Lishu's expression changed. He had not expected Li Yu to say such a thing. Are my words not clear enough? Li Yu's lips curled into a Ming smile as he said coldly, Does your Ming family not know that Ming Yufeng cultivates the Nine-Wolf Extreme Yin Curse? As he finished speaking, he turned around and signaled for Nie Tian to leave with him. Want to leave? Ming Lishu's anger soared to the heavens as he roared, None of you can leave today. Li Yu's body froze for a moment before he suddenly turned around. His eyes were incomparably cold as he glared at Ming Lishu. I don't want to embarrass you. You'd better not stop me. You're courting death. Ming Lishu's heart couldn't help but tremble when he sensed the terrifying aura in Li Yu's eyes. However, he immediately let out a roar and his silhouette moved in an instant. Monstrous flames rose up into the sky, causing waves of heat to billow out, blotting out the sky and covering the earth as he headed straight for Li Yu. Nie Tian's eyes darkened as his heart filled with shock. He was very worried about whether Li Yu had the strength to fight against Ming Lishu. As a demon tamer, Li Yu's talent was naturally outstanding. However, he was still young and his realm was definitely not as high as Ming Lishu's. Boom! At this moment, Li Yu took a step forward as his aura instantly surged to the limit. A terrifying strength accompanied by a towering battle intent gushed forth. After which, a dragon-like spear of darkness appeared in his hand. In an instant it was pitch black. Instantly, a boundless aura spread out, engulfing the earth and piercing through everything. Rumble 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 high up in the sky, the two powers collided. Heaven and earth trembled and rumbled. The crowd retreated once again as they looked at the shocking scene in astonishment. Nie Tian brought Rui Qianyu and retreated 10,000 meters away. He looked at Li Yu below in astonishment. He felt as if there was a demon god within Li Yu's body. The surging power simply wanted to devour everything. If he wasn't mistaken, Li Yu's cultivation should be around the 5th level of the Heaven Realm. He was far inferior to Ming Lishu, who was in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. The Heaven Realm was the pinnacle of the 6 levels of Saint. The difference between each level was equivalent to the difference between the previous level and the previous level. Li Yu, with his cultivation of the 5th level of the Heaven Realm, was able to fight against Ming Lishu, who was in the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. One could well imagine how powerful his talent and fighting strength was. Chapter 42-44. There were 3 great prophecies of the Great Void of the Dragon Tribe: the Dragon Rebel Lord, the Dragon Shepherds, and the Demon Controller. The Dragon Rebel Lord represented hope, the Dragon Shepherds represented rebirth, and the Demon Controller represented destruction. Among the 3 great prophecies, the Demon Controller was the most powerful existence. He was extremely talented and powerful. He was an invincible saint. That was why demon tamers could represent destruction, subversion, death, and darkness. When Yi Yao realized that Li Yu was the demon master, he was shocked beyond words. However, there were many things that he didn't tell Nie Tian. He knew that Nie Tian, Li Yu, and Ni Jianming were the people in the Great Void prophecy, so they must be carrying some kind of mission. Since the demon taming was destruction, and the dragon shepherds were rebirth, when the two met, Perhaps there would be some unexpected changes in their destinies. Nie Tian retreated to the sky far away. He was shocked when he sensed the endless dark and terrifying aura from Li Yu. The meridian of dragon shepherds in his body seemed to be stimulated and sensed something. It was restless and almost went out of control. Who is this guy? How can he have such terrifying power? Everyone was trembling as they watched the terrifying scene in shock. As the chief law enforcement officer, Ming Lishu should be powerful. But Li Yu was just a nobody. How could he fight Ming Lishu head-on? Bang! While everyone was still in shock, a muffled sound came from the sky. Then, a figure flew out from the towering fire waves, leaving a trail of blood in the air. The crowd was shocked when they saw that. Then, they were shocked when they saw the figure clearly. It was Ming Lishu. How is this possible? Everyone's first reaction was disbelief. Many people's eyes were wide open, and they were speechless. A powerful cultivator like Ming Lishu had been defeated by Li Yu. It was too shocking. After a while, the turbid waves in the sky dissipated. Li Yu was like a giant holding a long spear. His eyes were glowing with a cold and evil light. Ming Lishu was standing in the sky. There were several bloody wounds on his body, and he looked like a mess. He looked at Li Yu with fear in his eyes. Who exactly are you? Ming Lishu asked in shock, but his throat was rolling, and he was doing his best to suppress the blood that was about to come out. He was defeated. He was defeated by a nobody. Moreover, he was defeated in one move. He could only swallow this humiliation with tears in his eyes. However, he was the chief law enforcement officer after all. He had to protect his remaining dignity. Even if he was defeated, he had to maintain his dignity. Li Yu, the guardian of the life and death hunting ground, Li Yu replied coldly. However, every word he uttered gave off a feeling of killing intent. Li Yu, I will remember this name. Ming Lishu spoke in a low voice, but his body trembled while a mouthful of blood surged, yet he forcefully swallowed it back before he spat it out. Li Yu's eyes narrowed slightly. She had already seen through everything and said, "If you don't want to die, it's best if you don't speak anymore." Ming Lishu's eyes trembled, and his body trembled again. In the end, he could not even protect his last bit of dignity. A mouthful of dirty blood spurted out, and his face became as pale as a sheet. Li Yu's face was cold and emotionless. She merely frowned slightly, then turned around and said to Nie Tian, "Let's go." Yes. Nie Tian nodded heavily. Rui Qianyu's injuries were not light, and they had to be treated as soon as possible. However, just as the two of them turned around and were about to leave, several terrifying auras rose from the surroundings. Suddenly, an enormous and oppressive aura descended, like a majestic wave that rolled from all directions. Li Yu frowned and took a step forward. A monstrous aura was released, and it resisted the waves. Nie Tian placed Rui Qianyu into the 9 superbs, then moved and hid behind Li Yu. Under the enormous pressure, the crowd retreated again. Many people looked at the sky in shock, not knowing what was going on. "Young man, what an imposing manner!" Just then, a deep voice rang out with a hint of playfulness. "Since you're here, why don't you show yourself?" Li Yu's gaze turned cold. The spear in his hand, the 9th Heaven Imperial Devil, was pointed at the sky. Suddenly, a heaven-devouring aura erupted, forcibly dispersing the pressure in the surrounding space. After the surge, a gray-robed figure appeared. He stood tall and had the bearing of a grandmaster. However, his eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared fixedly at Li Yu. Li Yu was not the least bit afraid. He stared straight at the person as if he was provoking him. Who would have thought that the Angel Clan would have someone like that hidden away? The man said coldly. "Looks like my trip to the Blood Wing Clan was not in vain." The man's mouth twitched, and the killing intent in his eyes grew even stronger. "The Ming Clan's master, Minister Ming, is indeed a top expert of the Angel Clan." Li Yu's eyes flickered as he responded in a deep voice. "The Ming Clan's master." The crowd's eyes trembled when they heard Li Yu's words. No one had expected that the person who had come was the Ming clan's master. The Ming clan's master was Ming Yufeng's father. It seemed that things had really gotten out of hand this time. Nie Tian stared at Minister Ming. His eyes darkened as he was shocked. Although Minister Ming was the Ming clan's master, he was still young and in the prime of his life. His aura was no weaker than the elders of the Angel clan. It was really shocking. Previously in the City of Angels, Nie Tian had thought that the Angel clan's top fighting force was the clan's master, a few patriarchs, and a few elders. It seemed that he had guessed wrong. Apart from the main faction, the Angel clan had many powerful branches. They were no weaker than the main faction. It was no wonder that even the Dean, Xingguang Muxue, had to be restrained by the Ming clan and the other aristocratic families. I have been in seclusion for many years. I never thought that someone would still recognize me. Minister Ming spoke calmly, but he could not hide the anger in his heart. Master Ming, others may not recognize you, but I can recognize you even if you turn into ashes. Li Yu's eyes suddenly flickered as he said in a deep voice, "Back then, I saw you force my master to death with my own eyes." Minister Ming frowned. Then, he thought of something and said with a smile, "I remember now. You are the child who followed Li Xing. You finally remember." Li Yu's lips curled into a cold smile. "Back then, my master, Li Xing, was the chief enforcer. He was upright and plain-spoken, and he hated evil. Your fourth brother, Ming Yuanshu, was tyrannical in the academy and killed the innocent. Teacher was right. He tolerated it again and again, but he pressured him again and again. In the end, teacher personally executed him. And your eldest brother, in order to take revenge, led the powerhouses of the aristocratic families to threaten the academy. In order not to implicate the academy, teacher chose to end his own life. I will never forget that scene." Chapter 42-45. An eye for an eye. Li Yu's aura erupted like a flash flood. His towering anger and hatred transformed into a terrifying fighting spirit. The power within his body was stimulated to the extreme. So strong. Nie Tian was shocked when he sensed the terrifying impact coming at him. Li Yu's aura had increased by several times. It had reached a terrifying level. It was hard to imagine that a cultivator in the 5th level of the Tian Qi realm could release such an aura. Nie Tian had seen many peak experts, such as the 5 deans. Li Yu's aura wasn't any weaker than theirs. Li Yu was worthy of his title as a demon tamer. The crowd was pushed back again by the aura. Many people looked at Li Yu in fear. They were shocked beyond words. No one had expected Li Yu to challenge Minister Ming. Minister Ming was an expert who had been famous for a long time. His cultivation was much higher than Li Yu's. Li Yu had a good reason to erupt. When he had come to the Bloodwing Academy, he had been a child. His teacher, Li Xing, had raised him. To him, Li Xing was his teacher and his father. Back then, he had watched as Li Xing was killed by the aristocratic families. The anger in his heart had burned like a flame. He had almost gone insane. But at that time, he was too weak. He could only watch, unable to do anything else. He had endured for so many years just so that one day, he could kill his enemy and offer a blood sacrifice to his teacher. Now, the person who had killed his teacher was right in front of him. How could he endure this? Li Yu, I let you go back then because I was soft-hearted. I didn't expect you to become the root of a disaster today. Minister Ming smiled indifferently at Li Yu's coercion. He said, "But that's fine. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." He took a step forward. In an instant, a raging flame engulfed the entire sky. The scarlet flame was like a burning cloud in the sky. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the two auras collided. Although Li Yu was powerful, he was still suppressed by Minister Ming. Li Yu's body sank a little as his feet sank 3 inches into the ground. However, his eyes were extremely sharp and filled with cold, killing intent. Come, let me see how strong your desire for vengeance is. Minister Ming laughed coldly. The flames around him surged and condensed into streams of molten lava. Like a giant snake, it pounced ferociously towards Li Yu. Li Yu's eyes darkened. The 9 heavens imperial demon spear pierced through the heavens. The spear's will penetrated and the darkness was boundless, blocking most of the lava. However, some of it still fell and smashed onto the shield around his body. The lava was incomparably scorching, and its burning power was extremely strong. Even though Li Yu had a protective barrier, he was still burned. His entire body was in searing pain. Kill! But he was not afraid at all. With a roar, he rose from the ground and pointed his spear at Minister Ming. Just in time. Minister Ming smiled coldly. He formed a seal with both hands and a strange flame totem appeared in front of him, pressing down on Li Yu. Bang! In the air, a spear shadow rushed out, but it was blocked by the flame totem. Immediately after, the flame totem released numerous flame shackles. Like long snakes, the shackles slithered down at an astonishing speed, enveloping Li Yu. Li Yu was in the air. Obviously, he did not expect this to happen. He was surprised and wanted to react, but it was too late. He was too impulsive and underestimated Minister Ming's strength. Oh no! Nie Tian's eyes trembled and his heart sank. Li Yu was already at a disadvantage. Once Minister Ming suppressed him, he would be in danger of dying. Boom! Bang bang bang! At this critical moment, a giant hand suddenly appeared in the air and directly fell down, crushing the flame shackles. Minister Ming's expression changed. He raised his head to look into the sky. Where his gaze landed, there was a white-robed figure standing tall and majestic like a mountain. Holy light shone brightly. Dean! Nie Tian looked at the figure in white and immediately recognized that the latter was Xingguang Muxue, the Dean of the Blood Wing. He could not help but feel happy. Nie Tian immediately felt relieved when Xingguang Muxue arrived. Things had already gotten out of hand. If Xingguang Muxue still did not appear, the situation might completely spiral out of control. Minister Ming frowned and looked gloomily at Xingguang Muxue. Dean! Xingguang Muxue said indifferently, his face cold. Dean, what happened in the Blood Wing Academy should be resolved in the Academy. You aristocratic families should not interfere. My son died for no reason. As his father, shouldn't I seek justice for him? Minister Ming sneered. Even in front of Xingguang Muxue, he did not restrain himself in the slightest. He was very arrogant. Xingguang Muxue frowned and said coldly, Ming Yufeng's matter will be handled by the Academy. There is no need for you to worry. Is that so? Minister Ming sneered again. He raised his eyebrows and said, What if I must interfere? Ming family head, this dean will naturally investigate Ming Yufeng's matter and give him justice. Please do not be overbearing and push things to the extreme, Xingguang Muxue said coldly, anger in his eyes. Humph! Humph! Minister Ming laughed sinisterly. He said in a loud voice, Lord Dean, do you think right or wrong is important at this time? I'm afraid you cannot give me justice. What kind of justice does Ming family head want? Xingguang Muxue asked gravely, suppressing his anger. Of course, he understood that at this moment, the so-called right and wrong was no longer important. What was important was whose fist was stronger. In this world where the martial way was revered, there was a wise saying, reason is a bitch. Always stand on the side with the bigger fist. The truest way to survive. Weakness is wrong. Xingguang Muxue had not expected things to go to the extreme so quickly. In the beginning, he had used Nie Tian to suppress the aristocratic families in exchange. But Nie Tian's speed had far exceeded his expectations and caught him off guard. But now that things had come to this, it would be inexcusable for him, the dean, to hide his head and not show his face. Moreover, he knew that Nie Tian's identity was special. Nothing could happen to him. I want everyone related to my son's death to be buried with him. Minister Ming's gaze turned vicious. He stared at Xinguang Muxue like a wolf and said coldly, Xinguang Muxue frowned and his expression darkened. He had not expected Minister Ming to be so overbearing. According to him, Nie Tian was the one who deserved to die the most. The others, such as Zhu Xi, Su Yu, and even Lai Yan and Huang Ling, should all die. Xinguang Muxue knew that he had to protect Nie Tian, even if he had to fall out with the aristocratic families. Seeing that Xinguang Muxue was silent, Minister Ming twitched the corner of his mouth and asked provocatively, Dean, can you give me justice? Xinguang Muxue was silent for a while. Then, he said in a clear voice, I was there when Li Xing died. I saw the whole process with my own eyes. Unfortunately, I wasn't the dean at that time. Senior Li Xing chose to commit suicide to avoid the conflict between the academy and the aristocratic families. I deeply respect his courage and righteousness for committing suicide. But I don't agree with his way of doing things. If I had been the dean, I would not have let anyone force the chief law enforcer of the academy to commit suicide. Back then, I didn't have the chance to resist on behalf of the Bloodwings Academy. Chapter 42-46. Resist to the end. Every word of Xinguang Mushue's was resounding, displaying his great determination. Since he was already the dean, then the tragedy of the past could not be played out in his hands. Resist to the end. Resist to the end. Resist to the end. As soon as he spoke, the entire crowd erupted into a tsunami of shouts. Everyone present was united against a common enemy, their morale shaking the heavens. The great aristocratic families were very powerful. They had deep roots in the Bloodwing Academy, controlling much of the Academy's authority. It was precisely because of this that the scions of these aristocratic families were all arrogant and despotic, committing all sorts of crimes. They only relied on the powers behind them. They felt that even if they made mistakes, the Academy would not dare to do anything to them. Many of the Academy's students had been bullied and humiliated by the scions of the aristocratic families. Now that the dean had personally stepped forward and set an example, how could they not support him? Nie Tian's gaze swept over the crowd before him. He could not help but frown, thinking to himself, it seems that this matter is going to get out of hand. Oh! Ming Xiangshu was not the least bit afraid of this situation. On the contrary, he smiled cold and glanced at Xinguang Muxue. Lord Dean, are you declaring war on our aristocratic families? This dean has never been willing to become enemies with the various aristocratic families. All I hope for is that the Academy's affairs will not be interfered with by any other power. Xinguang Mushue's gaze was heavy. My Bloodwing Academy does not wish to declare war, but it does not fear war. If there are people who harbor ill intentions and attempt to overthrow the Bloodwing Academy, as the dean, I will fight to the death to protect the Bloodwing Academy. Fight to the death to protect the Bloodwing Academy. The resounding voice was followed by thunderous shouts from the crowd. Fight to the death to protect the Bloodwing Academy. Ming Xiangshu smiled coldly, looking provocatively at Xinguang Muxue. Lord Dean, I believe you have been preparing for this moment for a long time. Xinguang Muxue frowned. He said gravely, Patriarch Ming, you and I are both members of the Angel Clan. Fighting against our own clansmen is something this dean does not wish to see the most. I hope Master Ming will not take the most wrong step. Minister Ming's gaze shifted and his face was fierce. He stepped forward and said coldly, What if I must take this step? Boom, boom, boom. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura appeared in the surroundings of the Bloodwing Academy, soaring into the sky. Like a dense dark cloud, the aura actually surrounded the entire Bloodwing Academy in an instant. Xinguang Muxue could feel the terrifying pressure coming from all directions. He couldn't help but frown and his face darkened. He had not thought that Minister Ming's stance would be so unyielding. These experts had obviously been at the Blood Wing for a long time and were waiting for Minister Ming's orders. Furthermore, it was impossible for a single Ming clan to have so many experts. The other aristocratic families had also come. Headmaster, since I've come, I can't return empty-handed. Minister Ming was enjoying the look of shock on Xinguang Mushue's face. He smiled faintly and said, "Therefore, I have brought some friends with me this time. The headmaster should not mind. Let's go." At this moment, Xinguang Mushue sensed that something was wrong. His expression changed and he growled, "Minister Ming, just what are you planning?" If Minister Ming had only come for Ming Yufeng's death, he wouldn't have mobilized such a large force. Moreover, Ming Yufeng had only been killed recently. No matter how fast the news spread, it couldn't have instantly spread to so many aristocratic families. Although Ming Yufeng was the young master of a famous family, his death didn't have such a great impact that it would attract so many aristocratic families. Therefore, the only explanation was that Minister Ming and the various aristocratic families had been planning this for a long time. Ming Yufeng's death was just a coincidence. It had become the fuse for this incident. My son died mysteriously in the Bloodwing Academy. This means that a huge problem has appeared in the academy. Minister Ming's lips curled into a cold smile. This headmaster feels that you have controlled the Bloodwing Academy for too long. It is time for the Bloodwing Academy to change its name. It is time for the name to change. You're rebelling. Although Xinguang Mushue had guessed this, hearing it from Minister Ming's mouth still shocked him. Bloodwing Academy was one of the 5 great academies of the sacred world. Behind it was the Angel Clan, and it also had extremely close ties with the other 4 academies. Apart from the main faction, the Angel Clan also had various branch factions. The Emperor, Angel Xinguang Yu, the 9 Great Elders, and the 4 ancestors represented the main faction of the Angel Clan. As for the Ming family, the Qian family, the Hua family, and the other aristocratic families, they represented the branch factions of the Angel Clan. One was the main faction and the other the branch factions. Originally, there had been a difference in the main faction, each doing their own thing. But in the recent hundreds of thousands of years, the branch factions of the Angel Clan had grown stronger and stronger, and they had begun to have the strength to contend against the main faction. As a result, the conflict between the main faction and the branch factions had grown greater and greater. The matter of Li Xing back then had happened precisely after this conflict had reached a certain level. Back then, Bloodwing Academy and the Angel Clan had come to a compromise in order to prevent the matter from escalating and causing bloodshed within the clan. They had tacitly agreed to Li Xing's sacrifice. The original attempt to keep the peace did not bring true peace. Instead, the conflict between the main faction and the branch factions grew more and more intense. At the same time, the branch factions grew more and more difficult to control. Minister Ming said that Bloodwing Academy should change its name. This was undoubtedly a declaration of war against Bloodwing and the branch factions. Rebelling? Minister Ming chuckled. Since ancient times, power has always been in the hands of the strong. Even the City of Angels has been destroyed in the hands of people like you. Are you still worthy of representing the Angel Clan? You already know? Xinguang Mushue frowned in surprise. The news of the City of Angels being destroyed by the Qi demon god was originally supposed to be kept under wraps to prevent the Angel Clan from being shaken. He never thought it would still spread. However, there was no way to keep this matter under wraps. After all, it was just too big. Can you hide it? Minister Ming sneered. You can't even protect the holy City of Angels. You still want to be the Emperor in peace? Dream on. You. Xinguang Mushue's eyes darkened. His chest heaved violently. He was furious. He had never imagined that these aristocratic families would be so ambitious. They actually coveted the position of Emperor. The Emperor of the Angel Clan had always been inherited by the main Angel Clans. There had never been a branch Angel Emperor. Even the Great Elder rarely came from the branch angel clans. It seemed that Minister Ming and the others had been planning this for a long time. The destruction of the City of Angels gave them ample reason to stage this scene. Xinguang Muxue, I'll give you a chance right now. As long as you're willing to join us and hand over the Bloodwing Academy, you'll be able to retain your position as an elder once the new angel tribe is formed, Minister Ming said with a frown. Chapter 42-47. Xinguang Mushue's face was gloomy, and a terrifying aura surged around him. He was like a volcano that could erupt at any time. He had never expected that the Ming family would ally with the other aristocratic families and attempt to annex the main family. Yet, Minister Ming wanted to rope him in, which was an insult to him. Sir Dean, you're so angry. Minister Ming's face was gloomy, and he said in a cold tone, I don't think you understand the situation. Look around. If you do not agree to this patriarch's request, then today, the Bloodwing Academy will face a calamity of destruction. And you, the Dean, will become the sinner of the Bloodwing Academy. Xinguang Mushue's face was cold and murderous. He glanced at the experts around him. There was no fear in his eyes, only determination. He suddenly smiled and said loudly, What a sinner! If I agree with you today, I will be the sinner of the Bloodwing Academy. Where is he? Ming Shangshu's eyes were full of murderous intent. He said in a deep voice, In that case, don't blame me for being merciless. Do it. Yes. As the sound of his last word faded, the experts from the various aristocratic clans who had been accumulating their strength all around replied in unison. After which, a terrifying aura gushed forth from them, rumbling down from the skies, akin to the night devouring the day. Dean. Seeing that Xinguang Muxue was about to be overwhelmed, the martial artists of the Bloodwing Academy exclaimed. Many people gathered their auras and prepared to rush over. As the Dean of the Bloodwing Academy, Xinguang Mushue's strength was close to the peak. However, facing so many sky martial artists at the same time, even he couldn't bear it. Everyone, step back. Without my order, no one is allowed to come close. At this moment, Xinguang Mushue's voice suddenly rang out, falling in everyone's ears like thunder. Then, everyone saw a figure soar into the sky. 9 pairs of angel wings unfolded on his back, and he resisted the pressure with holy light. Xinguang Muxue wanted to break through the pressure, but the terrifying pressure around him made him feel like he was entangled by thousands of iron chains. He couldn't break free at all. After all, he was facing over 100 sky martial divine ancestors, and some of them were not weaker than him. Even with his 9 wings spread out, he could only barely resist and could not hold on for too long. Xinguang Muxue. Minister Ming stood high up in the sky, his aura billowing. He stared coldly at Xinguang Muxue and sneered, Your strength is not bad, but it is a pity that you are against me. You are destined to die here. Xinguang Muxue raised his head with difficulty. The anger in his eyes was like an invisible hand that locked onto Minister Ming. The corners of his mouth twitched. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Instead, blood flowed out. This is your last chance. Are you willing to submit? At this moment, Minister Ming realized that Xinguang Muxue couldn't hold on any longer. He roared with a playful look in his eyes. No! Xinguang Muxue spat out a mouthful of blood and roared furiously. He was like a beast trapped in a cage, violent yet powerless. You have guts! Minister Ming smiled coldly and released his murderous intent. He shouted, I will fulfill your wish. As soon as he said those words, he swept his gaze across the crowd, and an even more terrifying aura burst forth from him. Thunderous rumbles echoed in the air as it bore down on Xinguang Muxue. Bring it on! Xinguang Mushue's eyes were filled with determination. He did not show any signs of fear. Instead, he let out a hearty laugh. He would die for the greater good. He would die for the greater good. He would die with no regrets. Dean! At this moment, A low roar was heard. Then, a figure shot into the sky like a mad dragon and forcefully dispersed part of the pressure. Minister Ming's eyes narrowed. When he saw the figure clearly, his lips curled into a cold smile. The person who had charged out was none other than Li Yu. Since Li Yu wanted to take revenge on him, he might as well kill her as well and put an end to all troubles. However, Li Yu's speed was unbelievably fast and his strength was shocking. He managed to break through the wall of pressure. "This is my chance!" Xingguang Muxue exclaimed in surprise. Although he was prepared to sacrifice himself, if he could survive, he would fight for it. Li Yu's sudden attack was a good opportunity for him. In the blink of an eye, the 9 pairs of wings on Xingguang Mushue's back flapped. A powerful force spread out and loosened the tightened space around him. A slight loosening meant a chance of survival. Xingguang Mushue's wings flapped again and he dashed out. At the last moment, he managed to escape from the claws of death. Bang! Bang! However, the two of them were still affected by the remaining force of the pressure. 2 muffled sounds could be heard in the air. It was as if they had been hit by an invisible giant hand. They were thrown thousands of meters away before they managed to stabilize themselves. "Are you all right?" Xingguang Mushue's body was covered with wounds. However, Li Yu, who was next to him, was more injured than him. He could not help but worry. "I'm fine," Li Yu replied in a low voice. His eyes were fixed on Minister Ming, and they flashed with a cold light like that of a ferocious beast. Xingguang Muxue looked at him for a long time before he finally remembered who he was. "You actually escaped. Interesting." At that moment, Minister Ming looked at Li Yu and Xingguang Muxue with a sinister smile. Of course, he could tell that although Li Yu and Xingguang Muxue were not dead, they were severely injured and were not far from death. "Minister Ming, I'll make a bet with you. Do you dare to accept?" Li Yu's eyes darkened as he growled. "Bet? What bet?" Minister Ming's lips twitched and he smiled coldly. In reality, the situation was already under his control. There was no need for him to bet with Li Yu. However, he wanted to know what Li Yu wanted to say. "You and I will fight. If you lose, I'll kill you. If I lose, the blood wings will be yours." Li Yu's eyes flashed coldly as he spoke loudly. Minister Ming's eyes trembled. He smiled and said, "Li Yu, what status do you have in the blood wings? How much weight do your words carry?" Li Yu's eyes darkened as he looked at Xingguang Muxue and said, "Dean, this is the blood wings' only chance." Xingguang Mushue's eyes trembled. Clearly, Li Yu wanted him to open his mouth and make the bet effective. He looked at Li Yu. In his eyes, he didn't feel a request, but a threat. That's right. He could sense that Li Yu was threatening him. However, as Li Yu had said, this was the Bloodwing's only chance. He could fight to the end, but the result would be a bloodbath. However, this bet was a little too big. If he lost, he would lose the entire Bloodwings Academy. Clearly, Minister Ming didn't want to be too forceful. He didn't want the aristocratic families to waste too much of their power on the Bloodwings Academy. Their true enemy was the main angel faction. Li Yu was only in the 5th level of the Heaven Realm. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't be a match for Minister Ming. Furthermore, he was heavily injured. Judging by his appearance, it was unknown whether or not he would be able to survive. Under such circumstances, wasn't fighting Minister Ming the same as courting death? Chapter 42-48. Xingguang Muxue raised his head and saw that the person standing in front of him was Nie Tian. His eyes narrowed. He knew that Nie Tian was a heavenly level expert and also knew the status of a heavenly level expert in the Angel Clan. However, the matter at hand was related to the life and death of the Bloodwing Academy and his life's honor. He couldn't make a decision easily. Xingguang Muxue didn't know Li Yu's identity, but he remembered that the person who brought Li Yu to the Bloodwing Academy was the current Angel Emperor Xingguang Huaiyu. He guessed that Li Yu and Xingguang Huaiyu must have a very close relationship. He hadn't paid attention to Li Yu for so many years. It was only today that he realized that this mysterious young warrior had such terrifying strength. Judging from the potential that Li Yu had shown, when he reached the 9th tier of the Sky Martial Realm, even the Angel Emperor wouldn't be his match. But now, his cultivation was too low and he was seriously injured. How could he fight Ming Xiangshu? He'll definitely win. I won't lose. While Xingguang Muxue was still hesitating, Nie Tian and Li Yu spoke at the same time. Xingguang Muxue felt the determination and confidence in their eyes and couldn't help but tremble. Okay. After a moment of silence, Xingguang Muxue finally nodded. He looked at Ming Xiangshu and said, Ming Xiangshu, tell the others to leave. Li Yu will represent the Blood Wing Academy and have a fair fight with you. If you win, the Blood Wing Academy will change its name and belong to an aristocratic family. If you lose, I don't need to tell you what will happen. You know very well what will happen. Very good. Ming Xiangshu's eyes flickered. He didn't expect Xingguang Muxue to agree. However, it wasn't strange. Xingguang Muxue had no other choice under the current circumstances. I have another condition. Right at that moment, Li Yu suddenly spoke. She said loudly, I need a helper. A helper? Ming Xiangshu sneered. He suddenly looked at Nie Tian and said disdainfully, Who? Him? The most important thing in a battle between two people was to be fair, but Li Yu wanted to help, which was wrong in itself. Minister Ming could have refused directly, but he wanted to see what Li Yu was up to. That's him. Unexpectedly, Li Yu nodded. She pointed at Nie Tian and said, He killed your son. Don't you want revenge? I will join forces with him to fight you. Do you dare to accept? Ha ha ha. Minister Ming was stunned at first, and then he couldn't help but laugh wildly. He was just joking earlier. He did not expect that Li Yu would actually want Nie Tian to be her helper. Nie Tian was just a heavenly tribulation Saint King martial artist. In the eyes of Sky Martial Realm experts, he was simply an ant not worth mentioning. However, Li Yu wanted Nie Tian to be her helper. Wasn't she asking for a burden? Li Yu, are you crazy? Xingguang Muxue was stunned for a moment, and then he shouted in a low voice. Nie Tian's identity was extraordinary. He could not let anything happen to him, but Li Yu wanted him to fight with Ming Xiangshu. It was obvious that she wanted to drag him down with her even if she had to die. However, at this time, Nie Tian looked at Xingguang Muxue calmly and nodded, Dean, I am willing to fight with Brother Li. You? Xingguang Muxue's eyes narrowed. He was speechless. He thought that Li Yu was crazy, but he did not expect that Nie Tian was even crazier. He was obviously courting death. Couldn't he see that? Well, kill one, get one free deal. How can I refuse? At this time, Minister Ming said with a cold smile, I was going to kill him anyway. This will save me a lot of trouble. In this way, you will have a companion on your way to the netherworld. After that, he waved his hand, and the experts of the major families stepped back. The world regained some clarity. Li Yu became solemn. He glanced at Nie Tian and then soared into the sky. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly as he followed after him. The two of them stood in the sky, one after the other. Long time no see, Dragon Shepherd. Nie Tian stared at Minister Ming, feeling uncertain, until he heard Li Yu's voice in his mind, which made him change his expression. He didn't expect that Li Yu would know that he was Dragon Shepherd. Do you think that I don't know who I am? Li Yu's voice rang out again with a mysterious smile. Hide behind me later. When I need your power, I'll tell you. Okay. Nie Tian held back his shock and nodded solemnly. It was obvious that Li Yu knew much more than he had thought. He was very curious about how much Li Yu knew about the three prophecies, and if he knew anything about his own mission. However, that wasn't important at the moment. What mattered most was the battle. Apparently, Li Yu wanted to use Nie Tian's mudraconic power to unleash greater power. If he fought Minister Ming on his own, he wouldn't have been able to defeat him. Bring it on. Li Yu taunted Minister Ming fearlessly. Bring it on. You're just a little loach and an ant. You want to overturn the sky in front of a dragon? You're dreaming, Minister Ming said coldly. Minister Ming said coldly. Then, torrential flames surged out of his mouth and turned into countless tongues of flame that shot towards Li Yu and Nie Tian. Nie Tian slightly narrowed his eyes. He instantly felt the excruciating pain of the flames, which made it hard for him to breathe. His cultivation was too low, and he couldn't even resist the remaining power of the flames. Li Yu frowned and stepped forward. 9 pairs of red angelic wings appeared on his back, covering the sky and blocking the flames. Nie Tian felt much better when a dark red shield appeared around him. Very good. Minister Ming stepped back slightly with a sinister smile on his face. He said in a deep voice, I underestimated you. You can condense 9 pairs of angelic wings in the 5th level of the sky martial realm. You're the first person I've ever seen. Let me see how strong your angelic wings are. Minister Ming laughed coldly and the wings of fire rose from his back. Suddenly, flames filled the sky and the surrounding area fell into a sea of fire. 9 Heavens Imperial Demon, break! Li Yu's eyes narrowed and he took out the 9 Heavens Imperial Demon spear again. A mighty chi burst out and turned into a huge shadow of the spear, rushing towards Minister Ming. Minister Ming smirked and smashed the shadow of the spear with his palm. Then, he used the momentum to attack Li Yu at an extremely fast speed. Li Yu's eyes trembled. The 9 Heavens Imperial Demon spear danced in the air and attacked Minister Ming. Boom! The next moment, the two forces collided and the wild power shook the world. Ming Shangshu's figure froze and stopped abruptly. Li Yu flew backwards. Before he could stand firm, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 42-49. Li Yu's gaze was filled with killing intent. A terrifying aura surged from his body. It was incomparably dark, and he felt as if he had been reborn. Did he hide his strength just now? Nie Tian frowned as he thought to himself. Li Yu's aura was much stronger than before. However, he had clearly been heavily injured, so why had his strength increased? Interesting. It seems that I have to take this battle seriously. Minister Ming also felt the change in Li Yu's aura. His eyes darkened as he spoke with a grim expression. He had to admit that he had underestimated Li Yu's strength. Although he was still very calm, he was worried. He could sense that there was a hidden power in Li Yu's body that made him feel threatened. 9th Heavens Imperial Demon, Counter Dragon Slaughter. At that moment Li Yu moved. The crimson wings on his back flapped and he streaked across the sky like a bolt of lightning. Wherever the spear pointed, the wind and clouds surged. Minister Ming took a step back. He didn't take the attack head-on. Boom! As the spear shadow fell, the void trembled, and cracks actually appeared in it. Minister Ming was in a sorry state from the spear intent, but he wasn't injured. He stared at the crack that flashed across the sky, and his heart was filled with shock. With his cultivation, it would be difficult for an ordinary cultivator of the 5th level of the heaven realm to injure him even if he stood still. But Li Yu's attack was peerlessly domineering. If he hadn't retreated in time, he would have definitely been injured. Li Yu's strength was truly terrifying. He was no weaker than an ordinary cultivator of the 9th level of the heaven realm. Li Yu, you've truly amazed me. Minister Ming smiled and said, If I don't kill you today, you'll become a great threat in the future. He rejoiced that he had personally come to the Bloodwing Academy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known that there was someone hiding in the Bloodwing Academy who wanted to take revenge on him. Fortunately, Li Yu's current level of cultivation was not high and his wings had yet to fully develop. If he was given a bit more time and his level of cultivation increased, he would probably become a disaster that would destroy the Ming family. So much nonsense! Shouted Li Yu. The 9th Heavens Imperial Demon danced in the sky. The spear intent condensed into a storm that swept up the dark clouds. Come! Minister Ming gave a low roar, and the 9 pairs of flame wings on his back burned. The surroundings immediately became a boundless sea of fire. Boom, 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 chi, 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 the world rumbled endlessly, and the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. When the crowd below saw this scene, they were shocked to the extreme. Who would have thought that the heavily injured Li Yu would be able to fight Minister Ming to such an extent? Li Yu, who exactly are you? Xinguang Mushue's gaze was as sharp as a blade as he locked onto Li Yu from afar. The shock in his heart made him question Li Yu's identity. Since Li Yu was able to condense angel wings, he must be a member of the angel tribe. However, his bloodline power was very strange. It was very similar to the angels of light, but there were also some differences. What was even stranger was that Li Yu's angel wings were blood-red in color. This wasn't something an angel of light could do. However, its bloodline was definitely not that of the Dark Knight Angel clan. It was as if there was some kind of power in his bloodline that caused his angel bloodline to mutate. However, it was extremely rare to find a power that could cause an angel bloodline to mutate. It should be stronger than the angel bloodline, or at least on par with it. Roar! Just as Xinguang Muxue was feeling bewildered, a dragon's roar was suddenly heard from the sky. It resounded through the 9 heavens, piercing through the clouds and cracking rock. Dragon energy? Xinguang Mushue's eyes widened in shock. This aura was clearly dragon energy. However, how was this possible? Li Yu was a member of the angel tribe. How could there be dragon energy in his body? Mu Tian did have dragon energy in his body, but he was too weak. In front of powerhouses like Li Yu and Minister Ming, his aura had long been concealed. Kill! Suddenly, an angry roar was heard from the sky. A 10,000-meter-long shadow of a demonic dragon appeared. Its enormous aura suppressed everything as it pounced towards Minister Ming. Huh! Minister Ming clearly did not expect this to happen. He was stunned for a moment before the 9 pairs of flame wings on his back fluttered wildly. Rays of flame energy fell like lightning towards the demonic dragon. Boom! 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 A series of violent explosions rang out. Under the impact of the violent force, raging waves surged. Minister Ming and Li Yu were instantly engulfed. The crowd stared at the sky in a daze. The shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. Could Li Yu be related to the dragon tribe? Xinguang Muxue was shocked, but at the same time, he was filled with endless doubts. He could not understand how Li Yu could have such a powerful dragon energy in his body. Li Yu clearly had the dragon tribe's bloodline. However, the angel tribe's rules forbade marriage with the dragon tribe. Child of taboo? Xinguang Muxue suddenly thought of something. It was as if something had hit his heart, causing him to be momentarily stunned. A long time ago, he remembered that the angel tribe once had a peerless genius named Xinguang Etian. He was the younger brother of the current angel emperor, Xinguang Yu. Xinguang Etian was supposed to become the next emperor, but he committed a grave mistake by falling in love with a girl from the dragon tribe. They even had a child together, and that child was the child of taboo. This matter caused a great sensation back then. The dragon tribe and the angel tribe strongly opposed it. In the end, Xinguang Etian committed suicide. The girl from the dragon tribe was imprisoned, and their child was secretly killed. Seeing Li Yu's divine might, Xinguang Muxue could not help but think of the child of taboo. Could it be that the child of taboo is not dead? Xinguang Mushue's eyes trembled. He was shocked beyond words. If that was really the case, it would definitely cause a great stir in the angel tribe and the dragon tribe. Bang! Just as Xinguang Muxue was overwhelmed with shock, a muffled sound was heard. Li Yu's figure flew backward like a kite with a broken string. He fell straight down and then stabilized himself in midair. On the other side, Minister Ming's figure also appeared. There were several wounds on his body, and his whole body was dripping with blood. However, he had only suffered superficial wounds, while Li Yu had suffered fatal ones. He's still lost. Xingguang Mushue's eyes trembled. He felt as if his heart was being torn apart. Even though Li Yu's talent was astonishing, he had still lost to Minister Ming. After all, the difference in their strength was too great. He lost. The people below were horrified. It seemed that this battle was about to end. Are you all right? In midair, Nie Tian stood behind Li Yu and asked in a deep voice. Chapter 4250. The Power of the Dragon Farmer. Nie Tian's eyes widened when he heard this name. He had been waiting for this moment. He naturally understood that Li Yu had asked him to be a helper not because of his combat strength, but because he needed his wood dragon power. Without the power of the dragon farmer, Li Yu would only be a burden to Nie Tian. Ha ha ha! At this moment, Minister Ming's maniacal laughter came from the sky. He shouted, Li Yu, you are indeed a genius. It's a pity that you have lost this battle. Is that so? Li Yu's lips curled into a cold smile. He released his aura crazily. Waves of violent energy surged out like raging waves, shaking the void. Suddenly, Nie Tian felt an intense agitation in his blood. He was about to lose control of his power. Nie Tian, release your power, Li Yu said in a low voice. His eyes turned as black as the abyss and he released an extremely dark power. The surroundings became dark and gloomy, as if the end of the world had come. Nie Tian was shocked. He activated his star bloodline and activated the power of the dragon farmer. The void was filled with the power of a dragon, as if thousands of dragons were roaring. The enormous power of the dragon farmer was absorbed by Li Yu in an instant. Suddenly, a terrifying aura surged in the sky, as if the dark night was devouring the world. This is a blood sacrifice. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was filled with shock. He had been wondering why Li Yu was able to release such an enormous power even though he was seriously injured. Now, he finally understood. Li Yu was using a blood sacrifice. He was using the power of his blood to stimulate the limits of his martial body. Although this method could increase one's power instantly, it would also cause great harm to the martial body. If it was light, the user would be weakened for a few years. If it was heavy, the user's martial foundation would be damaged. This battle was too important to Li Yu. It was not only for the Angel Clan, but also for the sake of avenging his master. To him, Li Xing was his closest relative, the most important person in his life. After he had seen Li Xing killed, avenging his master had become the most important thing in his heart. This B** starred, he's trying to scam Nie Tian. Immediately, Fat Cat shouted in anger. Li Yu had used the blood sacrifice to stimulate his own power, but he needed Nie Tian's bloodline power. Therefore, when Nie Tian activated his bloodline power, he would definitely suffer the pressure of the blood sacrifice. Nie Tian's strength was incomparable to Li Yu's. If the power of the blood sacrifice could seriously injure Li Yu, then it could directly kill Nie Tian. What kind of power is this? At this moment, Nie Tian felt a terrifying power rushing towards his martial body, causing his expression to change. Retreat. He looked at Li Yu. The latter roared and a terrifying power soared into the sky, shaking the heavens and earth. Bang! Before Nie Tian could react, he was hit by a terrifying force. His body flew backwards, leaving a trail of blood in the air. At the same time, Li Yu's body moved. The ninth heaven Imperial Devil broke through the sky and the roar of a dragon shook the heavens. Endless spear will surged out like rolling dark clouds. The extreme power of darkness finally erupted completely. How is this possible? Minister Ming stood coldly in the sky, feeling the dark pressure rushing towards him. He could not help but tremble and exclaim in shock. He had never dreamed that Li Yu would be able to explode with such terrifying power when he was seriously injured. The crowd below felt the overwhelming pressure high up in the sky, and their expressions became sluggish. Nie Tian stabilized his body, but there were many deep bloody scars on his body. A dark aura surged as if he had been burned by flames. However, the terrifying power in his body did not disappear. Instead, it became more and more violent, as if it wanted to devour him. Nye Tian, hurry up and stabilize your aura. Do not use your power again, Fat Cat said nervously. Fat, what's going on? Nye Tian took a deep breath and landed on the ground. He wanted to stabilize his blood vessels, but he was shocked to find that his blood vessels were surging and agitated. Even his 9 yuan meridians were about to explode. Immediately, the wounds on his body split open, and his entire body became a bloody mess. Oh no! Fat Cat's expression changed drastically. The power of the blood sacrifice was too strong. Nye Tian could not suppress it at all. Hold your breath and focus. Guard your blood vessels with your soul. Just as his blood vessels were about to go out of control, a voice rang out. Then, Nye Tian felt a powerful force surging into his body, forcefully suppressing the agitated power. Dean. Nye Tian turned around and saw a familiar face. He exclaimed in surprise. Don't speak, Xingguang Muxue said in a deep voice. He used the power of his blood vessels to suppress the power of the blood sacrifice. Nye Tian nodded. He followed Xingguang Mushue's power and slowly stabilized the agitated blood vessels in his body. At the same time, Li Yu's aura exploded to the extreme. He moved and pointed his spear at Minister Ming like a raging dragon that suppressed the heavens and earth. You want to kill me? You're dreaming! Shouted Minister Ming. His 9 pairs of angel wings flapped and flames rose to the sky. A violent aura filled the air and a sea of fire rushed out, burning everything in its path. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the two forces collided. The sky and earth shook. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Darkness and fire clashed. Light and darkness collided. Waves of energy flooded the sky and the air trembled. It was about to be torn apart. The crowd looked at the sky in astonishment. They could not believe that a cultivator in the 5th Tian Qi layer was able to create such a battle. Li Yu and Minister Ming were engulfed by the waves of energy. Only the sound of the impact could be heard. The crowd held their breaths as they stared at the sky. Their breaths almost stopped. After a long time, the chaos slowly cleared up. 2 figures gradually became clear. They were Li Yu and Minister Ming. Li Yu stood there coldly like a demonic spear bathed in blood. His eyes were as sharp as a blade. He stared coldly at Minister Ming. Minister Ming's hair was fluttering in the wind. He wasn't injured at all, but his expression was dull. The corners of his mouth were twitching. He seemed to want to say something, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make a sound. The crowd looked at the 2 silhouettes in a daze. They didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. They couldn't even tell who had won the battle. On the surface, it seemed like Li Yu had lost. However, the atmosphere at the scene made people feel that something was wrong. It was very strange. Master, I've avenged you, said Li Yu at that moment. At this moment, Li Yu opened his mouth. The redness and darkness in his eyes receded, and his eyes regained their clarity. His expression became tranquil, like a person who had been persisting for a long time had finally let go of the obsession in his heart. Chapter 42:51. The bloody scene in the sky shocked everyone present. No one had expected that Li Yu would be the final victor of this earth-shattering battle. We won, Nye Tian said blankly as he looked at Li Yu, as if he had just woken up from a dream. Even though he had already guessed that this would be the result, he was still shocked when the dust finally settled. At that moment, Li Yu's body suddenly trembled. Like a broken leaf, she fell to the ground. Li Yu. Xingguang Muxue reacted quickly. His body moved like lightning as he stretched out his hand. A vigorous yet soft force supported Li Yu, allowing her to land safely. Xingguang Muxue sensed Li Yu's aura and said worriedly, "His aura is very weak. We must treat him immediately. I'll bring him to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. There's someone there who can treat him." Nye Tian nodded slightly. He suppressed the intense pain in his body and took Li Yu, preparing to head to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. But at this moment, dozens of powerful auras appeared in the surrounding void. They were like mountains, suppressing the world and making it tremble. Xingguang Muxue furrowed his brows and swept his gaze over. Then, he said in a deep voice, "The battle just now has ended. Minister Ming's death in Li Yu's hands was purely his own fault. If you stop now, today's matter will end here. If you're still around, if you insist on being stubborn, then I will lead the entire Blood Wing and fight to the end." His voice wasn't loud, but it was like a clap of thunder in the ears of those experts from the aristocratic families. Minister Ming's death was something they had not expected at all. As the head of the Ming family, Minister Ming had a high reputation among the aristocratic families. Although his death could not shake the foundations of the aristocratic families, it was a great blow. At this time, if they directly counterattacked and massacred Blood Wing Academy would most likely not be able to resist. However, doing so would definitely consume his strength. Once the main Angel faction arrived, they wouldn't be able to withstand the Bloodwings. Most importantly, the battle just now had allowed them to witness Bloodwing's strength. It also made them wary of the strength of the main Angel type. Xingguang Muxue spoke at this moment. As long as they left, he would let bygones be bygones. To them, this was indeed a good way to step down. The atmosphere was deathly silent and oppressive. The aristocratic families did not respond for a long time, and Xingguang Muxue did not dare to act rashly. "This is a matter between the Ming family and Blood Wing Academy. We will no longer interfere." After a long time, a low voice rang out. Then, several dozen figures began to slowly leave. Soon, the figures of the experts from the aristocratic families disappeared, and the oppressive aura in the void disappeared without a trace. When Xingguang Muxue sensed the disappearance of the last powerful aura, his taut nerves finally relaxed. Although these aristocratic families seemed to be on the same side on the surface, there was a certain amount of competition between them. If their hearts weren't united, they would inevitably fall apart. "Dean, I'll go to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion right now." Nie Tian didn't waste any time and spoke directly. Xingguang Muxue nodded slightly and sent a voice transmission to Yifeng, asking him to protect him in secret. Since these aristocratic families had already retreated, they probably wouldn't make another move. Xingguang Muxue remained in the academy to calm the hearts of the people. After all, the previous incident had a huge impact on everyone. Blood Wing Academy had just escaped a calamity. Nie Tian brought Li Yu and quickly arrived at the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Su Qing had been waiting outside the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for a long time. Upon seeing Nie Tian arrive, he nervously asked, "Nie Tian, are you all right?" He had already heard about what had happened in Blood Wing Academy and had been worried. However, he wasn't a battle-type cultivator, so even if he went over, it would be useless. He could only wait. "I'm fine. Hurry up and take a look at Li Yu." Nie Tian quickly walked into the hall of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. He could sense that Li Yu's aura was extremely weak, even faintly discernible. Su Qing took Li Yu and checked the latter's condition. Then, he signaled Nie Tian to wait outside and brought Li Yu into the inner hall. Nie Tian stood guard outside the inner hall and immediately inquired about Rui Qianyu's condition. "Fat, is Rui Qianyu all right?" Previously, Rui Qianyu had been seriously injured. He didn't know how she was doing now. "She's fine. Her condition has stabilized. She just needs to rest and recuperate for a period of time," Fat Cat said solemnly. "Nie Tian, take a look at yourself first. That guy's blood sacrifice power isn't that easy to suppress. You have to handle it carefully." "Blood sacrifice power?" Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard these words. Fat Cat immediately explained, "That guy's strength is much stronger than yours. The blood sacrifice power didn't have much of an impact on him. However, your cultivation is too low. If the blood sacrifice power isn't handled properly, it's very likely that your bloodline will be damaged. Nie Tian nodded solemnly and began to carefully check the condition of his body. Previously, when the blood sacrifice power erupted, Xingguang Muxue helped him to suppress it. Now that he checked again, it seemed that the blood sacrifice power had weakened a lot and was slowly stabilizing. I should be fine. The power of my bloodline is very strong. It won't be easy for the blood sacrifice power to hurt me. Nie Tian let out a long sigh of relief. Fat Cat didn't respond. He had already checked Nie Tian's condition. Although everything was normal at the moment, he still felt that something was wrong. However, he couldn't be sure now. After all, even Nie Tian didn't feel anything wrong. About half an hour later, Su Qing walked out. His face didn't look good and was a little pale. "Brother Su, how's Liu?" Nie Tian stepped forward and asked anxiously. "His condition has stabilized. However, his injuries are too serious and his bloodline has been greatly damaged. My ability is limited, so I can only help him stabilize his bloodline first. If we want a complete treatment, we can only wait for teacher to return." Su Qing frowned and said solemnly. Nie Tian nodded. Although Su Qing played it down, he could feel that Liu's injuries were very troublesome. "Brother Su, this is the extreme Yin blood pill I took from Ming Yufeng. Hurry up and save Zhu Xi." At this moment, Nie Tian thought of Zhu Xi and immediately took out the extreme Yin blood pill and handed it to Su Qing. Su Qing took the blood pill and asked Nie Tian to wait outside. He turned around and walked into the inner hall. However, at this moment, he seemed to suddenly remember something. He turned around and said, "Nie Tian, an old man came looking for you not long ago." "An old man?" Nie Tian frowned and his heart sank. "That old man's aura is very strange. I can't sense his strength, but judging from his eyes, he should be a pinnacle expert." Su Qing frowned as if there was something he couldn't say. "Why did he come looking for me?" Nie Tian asked directly when he saw Su Qing's hesitation. "I asked him, but he didn't want to say much. He only mentioned a very strange bloodline power and told me to pass on a message to you." Su Qing frowned even more deeply and said solemnly. Chapter 42-52. The evil woman must not be left alive. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard these words. The evil woman was undoubtedly the 10 Annihilation evil woman, Rui Qianyu. It seemed that the awakening of Rui Qianyu's bloodline had alerted some people hiding in the dark. Su Qing could guess that things were not as simple as it seemed after seeing Nie Tian's reaction. He really wanted to know what was going on, but he did not ask. He was someone who knew his priorities. It was better not to ask about things that he was not supposed to know. After a while, Nie Tian became cold and asked in a deep voice, "Brother Su, where is that old man now?" Su Qing nodded and said, "He has left, but he said that he will come and find you again." "Thank you." Nie Tian expressed his gratitude. He knew that the old man would not leave. Instead of wasting time looking for him, it was better to wait quietly. Then, Su Qing went into the inner hall to treat Zhu Xi. Nie Tian's heart felt heavy as he thought about the old man. "Nie Tian, actually, I wanted to tell you before. The 10 exterminations of the evil woman is related to a very ancient prophecy of the end of the world. Once it is awakened, it will definitely attract some uninvited guests." At this time, little Fat Cat's voice sounded, "The old man has arrived." That old man has arrived and didn't show too much of an attitude. Perhaps it's not a bad thing. "What do you mean?" Nie Tian frowned in confusion. The 10 Annihilation evil woman once caused a world-ending crisis. Although the crisis has been resolved, there must be some forces in hiding, waiting for the 10 Annihilation evil woman to come again. I speculate that the old man did not come from such a force, or else he would not have left so easily. The Fat Cat explained as if he was trying hard to remember something, but he could not recall it no matter how hard he tried. Although he had grown his 9th tail, There were some ancient memories in his bloodline that could not be fully unlocked due to the long period of time. Fat, you mean that someone wants to kill Ryu? Nye Tian asked with a tremble in his eyes when he heard the danger Fat Cat mentioned. Yes. The Fat Cat was silent for a moment. Then, it nodded and said hesitantly, I'm not sure who that old man is. Currently, Bloodwing Academy's situation is still unstable. Why don't you stay here and wait for that old man to appear? Nye Tian thought for a moment and decided to temporarily stay in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Qing Qi should be back soon. With him around, he would feel more assured. For the next few days, Nye Tian stayed in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. On one hand, he paid attention to Li Yu and Zhu Shi's situation, and on the other hand, he waited for Rui Qianyu to recover. He had not told Rui Qianyu about the mysterious old man as he did not want her to worry too much. Soon, 3 days had passed. Zhu Shi had almost recovered, but Li Yu was still in a coma. Her condition was unknown. Su Qing did not have much confidence, so he did not dare to take any risk. He could only help Li Yu maintain her current state. Rui Qianyu had also recovered well, especially after being with Nye Tian. She had become much more cheerful. Such days made Nye Tian feel peaceful and fulfilled, and he was also very happy. However, he knew that such peaceful days were numbered. He could already feel the signs of an impending storm. Then, another 3 days passed, but the old man still did not show up. Although Nye Tian was not anxious, the worry in his heart was growing heavier. On the other side, Qing Qi had also not returned. Li Yu's condition was getting worse. Zhu Shi decided to bring Li Yu to the ancestral dragon's abyss. That was the ancestral land of the dragon clan. Zhu Rushuang was also there, so she should have a way to save Li Yu. Su Qing did not object to Zhu Shi's decision. It seemed that he already knew the relationship between Zhu Shi and Li Yu. Everyone packed up and prepared to leave the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. However, at this moment, a figure appeared in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's hall like a ghost. Nye Tian looked at the figure and could not help but narrow his eyes. It was a face full of vicissitudes of life. Beneath the wrinkles, only a pair of eyes as sharp as an eagle's emitted a sharp light. Nye Tian only took a glance at the other party, but he had the illusion of falling into an abyss. The momentary feeling of powerlessness almost made him collapse. It's you. At this moment, Su Qing reacted and exclaimed. I said that he would come again. The old man laughed heartily, looking very pleased. You. Su Qing frowned and said in a deep voice, You've never left the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, right? Smart. The old man nodded with a smile. I just wanted to see what you were doing. This. Su Qing's eyes trembled and he was completely stunned. The Myriad Yuan Pavilion was heavily guarded. Not only were there many experts secretly guarding it, but there were also extremely complicated arrays and boundaries. It was almost impossible for an ordinary person to enter the Myriad Yuan Pavilion without being noticed. However, this old man in front of him was able to silently hide in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion for several days. How could he not be surprised? You're the person looking for me? At this moment, Nye Tian forcefully suppressed the shock in his heart and asked. To be precise, I came to look for her. The old man smiled faintly and his sharp gaze turned to Rui Qianyu. The expression in his eyes instantly changed and revealed a trace of respect. Nye Tian's heart tightened. This old man was indeed here for the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman. Brother Zhu, you guys leave first. Nye Tian became cold and said to Zhu Shi. The 10 Annihilation Evil Woman had nothing to do with Zhu Shi and the others. Moreover, Li Yu's condition was not good and they had to go to the ancestral dragon's abyss as soon as possible. Wait. However, at that moment, the old man extended his hand to stop Zhu Shi. The corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile as he said, If you don't want him to die, then don't take him anywhere. What do you mean? Zhu Shi's eyes trembled as he asked. The old man nodded and said, The injury he suffered is the backlash of his bloodline after the blood sacrifice, which has damaged his martial arts foundation. Although his condition had stabilized, the power of the blood sacrifice had already seeped into his bloodline, causing his bloodline to be on the verge of collapse. In this kind of situation, if we don't know what's going on and directly help him force out the power of the blood sacrifice to restore his bloodline, even if we can save him, he will be a cripple for the rest of his life. Zhu Shi's eyes trembled, and he was stunned on the spot. With his current situation, the number of people in this world who can save him can be counted on one hand. The elder smiled faintly and said, "But you are very lucky. I is someone who can save him." Zhu Shi's eyes trembled again, and he immediately reacted. He actually took a step forward, knelt down and begged, "Old mister, please lend me a helping hand. I, Zhu Shi, will definitely remember this kindness and never forget it." Chapter 42-53. Me! Nie Tian was stunned by the old man's sudden words. He smiled faintly and said, "Old mister, I'm afraid you didn't come here just to ask me to beg you." The old man smiled faintly and said, "Nie Tian, you are a smart man. You should know that there is a price to pay for asking someone for help. Furthermore, the person in front of you is not an ordinary person. Once he dies, it will affect the life and death of the two tribes. Therefore, his life is very important. If it's too heavy, we must use another life of equivalent weight to save it." "What do you mean by that, mister?" Nie Tian could tell that the old man was implying something. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows as his heart tightened. "If I wants you to exchange her life for his, would you be willing to do so?" The old man's calm expression suddenly changed. The calmness in his eyes disappeared and was replaced by coldness. His eyes were like sharp blades that locked onto Rui Qianyu. Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. He took a step forward and stood in front of Rui Qianyu. He asked coldly, "What do you think?" He had already guessed the old man's identity and knew that the old man was here for the 10 Annihilations evil woman. However, the old man's direct coercion made him angry. Li Yu's life was indeed very important. It was related to the 3 prophecies of the Dragon Tribe and the Angel Tribe's forbidden child. If she died, it would most likely lead to something that would decide the fate of the 2 tribes. However, it was obviously impossible for Nie Tian to exchange Rui Qianyu's life for Li Yu's. There was no such thing as a noble life. How could it be exchanged so easily? The atmosphere in the hall suddenly became tense. A hidden pressure made it difficult for everyone to breathe. Su Qing's face suddenly changed. His forehead was covered in sweat. His lips trembled slightly, but he could not say a word. The old man had been able to hide in the Wan Yuan pavilion for several days without anyone noticing. It was hard to imagine how powerful he was. Even though the Wan Yuan pavilion was guarded by dozens of sky martial arts divine ancestor level powerhouses, they might not be a match for the old man. Most importantly, the old man was so close to them. Once he attacked, it would be instantaneous. Nie Tian and the others would not have a chance to fight back at all. "Sir, I'm willing to exchange my life for his." At this moment, a voice broke the silence. Zhu Shi stood up and spoke with a serious expression. "Your life?" The old man's gaze swept over Zhu Shi, but his tone was extremely disdainful as he said directly, "Forgive I for speaking bluntly, but your life is not heavy enough." Zhu Shi was stunned and couldn't speak for a moment. He was a smart man. He could vaguely tell that the old man was here for Rui Qianyu. He was completely unfamiliar with Rui Qianyu. He only knew that she had suddenly appeared next to Nie Tian and was extremely close to Nie Tian. He knew nothing else. He had secretly probed Rui Qianyu's aura. There was a hidden force in her body which shocked him greatly. He even felt that Rui Qianyu was more terrifying than Nie Tian. "Nie Tian, you should know who she is. Hand her over to I. Not only can you save your friends, but you can also save the world. Isn't that good?" The old man's face changed again. His gaze wandered around Nye Tian's face as he tried to persuade him. Save the world. Nye Tian frowned and sneered. If I can't even protect the people around me, how can I save the world? Then, his face darkened and he said directly, You're not here to save people. What's your purpose? Just tell me. Nye Tian, I have seen many stupid people in my life, but it's my first time seeing someone as stupid as you. The old man looked at Nye Tian and felt the determination in his eyes. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then, before Nye Tian could react, he looked at Su Qing and said in a low voice, Prepare a secret room and send him in. I will treat him there. No one is allowed to disturb him. Su Qing was stunned at first, but he quickly reacted. He nodded in surprise and ran into the inner hall like a gust of wind. You want to save him? Zhu Shi also reacted at this time. He was so overjoyed that he was speechless. He can't hold on any longer. It'll be too late if we don't save him now. The old man responded in a cold manner. He then glared at Nye Tian and said, Kid, you're not allowed to go anywhere. Just wait for I in the hall. Nye Tian frowned. He was a little dumbfounded by this sudden change of events. Soon, everyone went into the inner hall, leaving only Nye Tian and Rui Qinyu in the hall. After a moment of silence, Rui Qinyu finally could not help but ask, Nye Tian, what is the power that I've awakened in my body? The 10 Annihilation Evil Woman. Nye Tian hesitated for a while and decided not to hide it anymore. He told her everything about the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman. When the 9 Heavens Evil Woman descends, all worlds will be annihilated. After listening to Nye Tian, Rui Qinyu frowned slightly. She pondered for a while, and then fell into a deep silence. Qianye, the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman is only a kind of bloodline power. It's only stronger than other bloodlines, so it's regarded as a taboo by the world. After a while, Nye Tian said lightly, The so-called doomsday prophecy is just a rumor. You don't have to worry about it. A rumor? Rui Qinyu forced a smile and sighed softly. If that's the case, why didn't you tell me about it directly? And what's with this old man who suddenly appeared? I just don't want you to worry. Nye Tian was stunned for a while before he replied. I don't care if the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman is a doomsday prophecy or a taboo. I only know that this power belongs to me, and no one can take it away. The expression in Rui Qinyu's eyes changed slightly. It seemed to have returned to its previous coldness in an instant as she said in a deep voice. Qianye, don't worry. As long as I'm here, I won't allow anyone to hurt you. Nye Tian frowned as he sensed the change in Rui Qinyu and said in a heavy tone. Rui Qinyu looked at Nye Tian with a trace of sadness on her exquisite and beautiful face. She said lightly, What if I'm the one who hurts others? You won't. Nye Tian was stunned and panicked as he hurriedly said, Are you sure? The corner of Rui Qinyu's mouth twitched as a trace of evil appeared on her face. I'm sure. Nye Tian nodded and said, You're a kind person. You won't hurt others. In this world, kindness is probably equal to weakness. Rui Qinyu smiled bitterly and looked into the distance. Nye Tian was stunned. He could not understand why Rui Qinyu's change was so sudden and strange. It's that old man. At this moment, the fat cat screamed and said, What did he do to Rui Qinyu? Chapter 42-54. In the main hall of Myriad Yuan Pavilion, Nye Tian looked at Rui Qinyu. The darkness hidden in her eyes sent chills down his spine. In the past, Rui Qinyu was cold and indifferent, but that was all. However, at this moment, Nye Tian could see the endless abyss behind her eyes. He could vaguely sense that a certain dark attribute in Rui Qinyu had been completely stimulated. Everyone had a dark side, just like how Nye Tian had demonized and even gave birth to the Devil's Knight. However, throughout his journey, he had stuck to his original intentions and guarded the justice in his heart. He had never slacked off, so he had a clear conscience. Rui Qianyu was a person of light, but now, the clarity in her eyes had disappeared. The atmosphere was silent and even a little depressing. "They're out," Rui Qianyu said faintly when Su Qing and the old man appeared. Nie Tian saw that Su Qing and the others were overjoyed. It was obvious that Li Yu's condition had improved. "Old mister, you're really a miracle doctor. I thank you on behalf of Brother Li." Su Qing was a little excited. He was very impressed by the old man's extraordinary skills. Nie Tian was also very surprised. The fact that the old man had managed to heal Li Yu in such a short period of time was indeed very surprising. He was even more certain that the old man had done something to Rui Qianyu to cause such a change in her. "Don't thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank Nie Tian." With a smile on his face, the old man walked directly to Nie Tian and Raindrop's side and said, "Let's talk." "Okay." Nie Tian glanced at Rui Qianyu and nodded. Since the old man had come for Rui Qianyu and had done something to her, plus he had saved Li Yu, it was obvious that he was plotting something. "We need a place to talk." The old man nodded and said to Su Qing, "Sir, please follow me." Su Qing was much calmer now. He nodded repeatedly and led the way. After a while, Nie Tian and the others came to a secret room in the inner hall. Su Qing said, "Old mister, this room is very secretive. Your conversation will never be leaked." The old man's lips curled into a smile as he nodded. "Old mister." Then, Su Qing hesitated for a moment and finally said, "My master is the Myriad Yuan Pavilion's pavilion master, Grandmaster Qing Qi. This brother Nie Tian has a good relationship with my master. He isn't a bad person. If he has offended old mister, I hope old mister can forgive him. My master, Great Master Qing Qi, please forgive me." The old man looked at Su Qing and smiled without saying a word. How could he not hear the threat in Su Qing's words? However, no one could change what he wanted to do. Su Qing frowned as he watched the three of them enter the room. He was obviously very worried. In the room, the three of them each stood in a triangular formation, giving off a sense of opposition. However, at this time, an unexpected scene happened. The old man suddenly knelt down, bowed deeply to Rui Qianyu, and said loudly, "I'm late. Please punish me, Your Majesty." Nie Tian was startled by this sudden scene and was stunned for a moment. "What the hell is going on? Old servant? Empress? Where are all these things?" Rui Qianyu was also puzzled, but her expression didn't change much. She just said faintly, "Stand up and talk." "Yes." The old man responded and stood up slowly. However, he didn't dare to look at Rui Qianyu again. He stood on the spot in fear and trepidation. "What's going on?" Rui Qianyu asked faintly, but her expression was as cold as ice. It seemed that all her emotional changes were covered by the darkness hidden deep in her eyes. "Please follow me back to the 10 Destruction Heaven prison, Your Majesty. Once there, you will understand everything." The old man didn't answer her directly, but bowed and said, "What if I don't go back with you?" Rui Qianyu frowned. Although her tone was calm, there was a hint of oppression in it. "Then I will follow you until you change your mind." The old man didn't raise his head, but lowered his head and said. Rui Qianyu's gaze froze, and she became silent. The atmosphere once again fell into an oppressive silence. "Who the hell are you? What did you do to Royu? Why do you call her the Empress?" At this time, Nie Tian opened his mouth and asked coldly. At this moment, there were thousands of doubts in his mind, and they were tangled together, making him inexplicably restless. "Nie Tian, you already know enough about the Empress's identity," the Empress said. The old man finally raised his head and looked at Nie Tian with a cold gaze. He said, "The best decision for you now is to let go of everything about the Empress, and let the Empress go. Her own path." "Her own path?" Nie Tianling laughed. "You mean the path you chose for her? What did you do to her?" "I am the Empress's most loyal servant. How would I dare to disrespect the Empress?" The old man frowned and said, If it wasn't for the fact that you helped the Empress awaken her bloodline, I would have killed you a long time ago. So, you are kind to me? Nie Tion's gaze flickered and he asked coldly. Of course. The old man laughed and said, You are alive because of the Empress's kindness. If you don't know what's good for you and continue to pester the Empress, then I won't mind killing you. Kill me? Nie Tianling laughed. Then do you know my identity? Humph, the old man sneered. Nie Tian, don't try to use the people behind you to threaten I. To tell you the truth, even your predecessor, Donghuang Jingrong, was not someone that I cared about. Nie Tian's pupils contracted upon hearing the name Donghuang Jingrong. His expression froze. He didn't expect the old man to know that he was the Star Saint. The power of the stars is indeed powerful. The old man smiled again. Afterwards, he let out a long sigh and said, Donghuang Jingrong really is a prodigy. He was once the most dazzling existence in the saint's world, but he was harmed by a scoundrel. As he spoke, a wisp of a strange light flickered in his eyes and he said, Nie Tian, let me give you a piece of advice. Concealing one's ability and revealing one's ability is the way to protect yourself. If you reveal your ability too much, then Donghuang Jingrong will be your example. You? Nie Tian was shocked again. He stared at the old man, speechless. He didn't expect the old man to say something so shocking. It seemed that the old man had a very powerful background, so powerful that he could ignore the Star Saint. Nie Tian originally thought that the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was the pinnacle of the saint's world, until the Sun God Sword Emperor and the others showed him the power of a super expert. Chapter 42:55. In the room, Nie Tian was shocked by the elder's iceberg theory and fell into a long silence. Nie Tian, you are a hidden talent. Don't be blinded by the gains and losses in front of you. Seeing that Nie Tian was silent, the elder smiled faintly. You still have a long way to go. One day, your power will be enough to influence the entire all heavens sacred world. At that time, you will be qualified to stand side by side with the Empress. Stand side by side? Nie Tian's eyes trembled and he smiled inwardly. It turned out that in the elder's eyes, he was not qualified to stand side by side with Rui Qianyu. When he thought of this, he suddenly found it rather funny. This old man had appeared out of the blue, and had also proclaimed Rui Qianyu to be the Empress for no reason. Then, he had said some unverified words and wanted to take Rui Qianyu away from him. Was this not laughable? Even funnier was that he had almost compromised. The scene in front of him was very similar to the time when the Mo clan had tried to take Mo Rushi away in the 3000 Small World. Back then, Nie Tian had been fearless of heaven and earth, as well as ghosts and gods. Even when facing the Mo clan, which was far more powerful than him, he hadn't shown the slightest fear. But now, with the identity of the Star Sacred Leader and the support of many experts, he began to think too much and weigh the gains and losses. He did not want to admit it, but he had to admit that his edge and drive had been greatly restrained along the way. As the elder had said, hiding one's edge and showing one's intellect was the way to protect oneself. Suddenly, he looked up at the elder. The latter's eyes were as deep as an abyss, but he could sense a hint of cunning. It was as if he was proud of controlling his opponent. It seemed to be saying that he had no choice but to accept it. Sir, you don't know what Ryu and I have been through, so you have no right to comment on what happened between us. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I know that you've affected her mind with some kind of method. Everything she has done now is not from her heart. None of her decisions come from her heart, so I won't let her go. The old man was taken aback by Nie Tian's words. Clearly, he did not expect Nie Tian to have such a reaction. From his point of view, Nie Tian was already under his control. As long as Rui Qianyu asked, Nie Tian would have no choice but to agree no matter how helpless he was. But now, Nie Tian's unyielding attitude was something he didn't expect, and it caught him off guard. Rui Qinyu looked at Nie Tian and frowned slightly. She seemed to want to say something but didn't. The darkness in her eyes dimmed a little. What if it's unsafe for the Empress to stay here? The old man calmed down, looked at Nie Tian and questioned, "Do you know how many people are targeting the Empress and want her life?" "As long as I'm here, she'll be here," Nie Tian replied coldly and firmly. "For the Empress, are you willing to be the enemy of everyone in the world?" The old man's eyes glowed as he asked coldly. "If everyone in the world wants to kill her, so what if I'm the enemy of the world?" Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he said in a serious tone. "You!" The old man growled. He suddenly felt as if a huge rock was pressing on his chest, rendering him speechless. Nie Tian's stubbornness and toughness exceeded his expectations. After a while, Nie Tian's expression calmed down and he said, "It doesn't matter if she's the 10 Annihilations evil woman or the Water Monarch. In my eyes, she's Rui Qinyu. This has never changed. No matter what she has to bear in the future, I will shoulder it together with her." His words fell into Rui Qinyu's ears, but it was like a drop of water falling into the deep river, stirring up layers of ripples. The darkness in her eyes dimmed a little. "Nie Tian, what the Empress has to bear in the future is something you can't bear." The old man looked at Nie Tian and said cold. Nie Tian smiled and said, "What I can bear is something you can't imagine." The old man's eyes trembled violently. The tenacity and sharpness in Nie Tian's eyes made him shudder for a moment. However, he did not give up and said directly, "If I insists on taking the Empress away, can you stop him?" "I won't go with you." As soon as he finished speaking, Rui Qinyu said directly, "No matter what happens, I will stay by Nie Tian's side and be with him." "Your Majesty, you..." The old man's expression changed, but before he could finish, he was interrupted by Rui Qinyu. The latter said cold, "I'm the Empress, this is my order." "This..." The old man froze and was speechless. He obviously did not expect Rui Qinyu to use her identity as the Empress to control him. Rui Qinyu looked at Nie Tian and nodded with a smile. There was a hint of gentleness in her eyes. The old man's expression froze, and he could not react for a long time. Everything was under his control just now. Why did he suddenly lose control? After a long time, the old man calmed down and sighed. "Empress, since you are not willing to return to the 10 Destruction Heaven prison with me, I can only stay by your side." "Sir, how should I address you?" Nie Tian stepped forward and asked calmly before Rui Qinyu said anything. Nie Tian had many questions about this old man's identity. "Yu Jing." The old man looked at Nie Tian and hesitated for a while before saying his name. "Elder Yu, you said that there are people who want Ruoyu's life. Who are they?" Nie Tian nodded and continued to ask. "A very ancient force. It should have existed since the All-Heaven Sacred Realm was formed." Yu Jing's eyes darkened. "Rumor has it that this organization's responsibility is to maintain the balance of the All-Heaven Sacred Realm. A long time ago, the All-Heaven Sacred Realm was one. Then, a near-destructive disaster happened and the All-Heaven Sacred Realm collapsed, forming the many sacred realms that we know today. After the All-Heaven Sacred Realm was formed, that organization began to maintain the stability and balance of the various realms. They ruled the entire All-Heaven Sacred Realm as their protector. However, after a long time, this organization gradually hid behind the scenes and controlled everything in the dark. Now, many top forces in the All-Heaven Sacred Realm are actually controlled by this organization. For example, the Heaven Sacred Pavilion and the 5 academies that you know of." Then, Yu Jing's eyes flickered and he continued, "So, it's not safe for the Empress to stay here." Nie Tian's heart skipped a beat and he fell silent. Yu Jing's words were too shocking to him. Who would have thought that the famous Heaven Sacred Pavilion and the 5 academies were just puppets of a hidden force? After a while, Nie Tian became cold and asked, "Elder Yu, what exactly is this force?" Rui Qinyu's eyes flickered. She wanted to know who was threatening her. Chapter 42-56. When Yu Jing mentioned the hall of the mortal emperor, Nie Tian was astounded. This was because he had once seen a person who was revered as the mortal emperor, Yu Tsangqiong. More importantly, Yu Tsangqiong was known as the protector of the heavens. The hall of the mortal emperor that Yu Jing mentioned existed as the protector of the All Saints world. There were so many coincidences. Logic told Nie Tian that Yu Tsangqiong was definitely connected to the hall of the mortal emperor. He might even be the master of the mortal emperor. Nie Tian did not dare to guess just how important Yu Tsangqiong's identity was. However, he knew that demon god Qi and Emperor Karma Su had once obeyed this person. Demon god Qi and Dikuan Su, one was a demon god of the angel clan while the other was a taboo of the dragon clan. Their powers were at an unbelievable level, yet Yu Tsangqiong was able to make both of them submit to him. It was enough to show how terrifying he was. The Hall of the Mortal Emperor was definitely the most terrifying existence in the All Saints world. Nie Tian, do you know about the Hall of the Mortal Emperor? Yu Jing could not help but frown when he saw Nie Tian's expression change. No, Nie Tian shook his head, but I once saw a person who was revered as the Mortal Emperor. The Mortal Emperor. Yu Jing's eyes narrowed in shock. That's the master of the Hall of the Mortal Emperor. His name was Yu Tsangqiong, and I saw him in the ancestral grounds of the four ancient sacred clans. To be exact, I didn't see Yu Tsangqiong in person, but his soul. Nie Tian nodded slightly, calmed himself, and told Yu Tsangqiong that he had met in the ancient heaven. He told Yu Jing everything that had happened. Yu Jing fell into deep thought after listening to Nie Tian. He did not return to his senses for a very long time. He never thought that the young cultivator before him would have such a wondrous experience. Less than 100 people had heard of the Hall of the Mortal Emperor across the entire All Saints world, and the number of people who had actually seen the Mortal Emperor could be counted on one hand. However, it just so happened that Nie Tian had met the human emperor, and they had made an agreement. After a while, Nie Tian saw that Yu Jing had calmed down a little, so he asked, "Old Yu, was the man I saw the real human sovereign?" He really wanted to know if Yu Tsangqiong was the leader of the emperor's palace. "I isn't sure either." Yu Jing shook his head and said, "The master of the human sovereign hall is called the human sovereign, meaning that he is the most supreme among men. What you saw was a divine soul, so I guessed that it was most likely an emperor from the previous generation or even more ancient. It exists. I've heard that the four ancient sacred clans have a close relationship with the human emperor's palace. Every human emperor nominates the next human emperor. They'll look from the four ancient sacred clans first. Only when the four ancient sacred clans don't have a suitable candidate will they choose the outsiders are looking for a new emperor. Since the person you saw was in the firmament steel of the four great ancient sacred clans, it's highly likely that he's the human emperor." In the end, Yu Jing nodded heavily. Apparently, he was very satisfied with his guess. Yes. Nie Tian nodded, feeling that Yu Jing's speculation was reasonable. He then frowned and asked, "Elder Yu, why does the human emperor palace want to kill Ruoyu?" "It's very simple. It's because Her Majesty the Empress is the prophesied evil woman who will destroy the world." Yu Jing smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, it's not just the Empress. Any existence that threatens the balance of the Saints' world will be targeted by the human Emperor Hall." The balance of the sacred world? Nie Tian frowned, feeling a little confused. The human Emperor Palace doesn't allow people who are too powerful to exist. Yu Jing smiled again. His expression became much colder. He said, "Actually, they don't care about the All-Heaven Saints' world. Instead, they care about their own control over it. Things that are too dazzling. Not only is it a threat to the All-Heaven Sacred world, but it's also a threat to the human Emperor's palace. The human Emperor's palace has existed since the beginning of time and has long lost its original heart. What they want to maintain now is the absolute control of the human emperor palace over the all-heaven sacred world. Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly. He said, "So, they want to kill Ruoyu because her potential is too great and she might become a threat to them in the future. Am I right?" "You can say that." Yu Jing nodded slightly. Then, he looked at Nie Tian with a rather strange gaze. He said, "Nie Tian, instead of worrying about the Empress, why don't you worry about yourself?" "Me?" Nie Tian frowned and said, "Does the human emperor palace want to kill me too?" "Not now, but that doesn't mean they won't in the future." Yu Jing nodded. Then, he hesitated and said, "You mustn't expose your identity. If they find out that you're the inheritor of the power of stars, you'll be in big trouble." Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He suddenly thought of something and asked, "Elder Yu, you just said that Senior Donghuang Jingrong is a warning to me. What do you mean by that? Senior Donghuang's death has something to do with the human emperor's palace?" "Nie Tian, you're smarter than I thought." Yu Jing's sunken eyes darkened. He seemed a little surprised. He pondered for a while and said, "Speaking of which, I and Donghuang Jingrong were friends. Although they weren't close, I still respected him." Yu Jing's sunken eyes darkened. Back then, there were too many strange things about Donghuang Jingrong's sudden death. "I heard from a friend that Donghuang Jingrong died in the hands of the Heaven Law Sacred Pavilion. However, no one in the Heaven Law Sacred Pavilion could fight Donghuang Jingrong. Even the pavilion master was no match for Donghuang Jingrong. So, I guessed that the people of the Heaven Law Sacred Pavilion must have asked the human emperor's palace for help." Then, Yu Jing sighed and said, "Donghuang Jingrong was supposed to be the most dazzling existence in the past few million years. Unfortunately, he was too outstanding and attracted the attention of the human emperor's palace. In the end, he was killed. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind," Nie Tian said after a moment of silence. He didn't completely believe Yu Jing's words, but he guessed it. Otherwise, Donghuang Jingrong wouldn't have died so easily. "Yes." Yu Jing nodded and patted Nie Tian's shoulder. He said, "Young man, let me tell you this. Be 30% arrogant and 70% secretive. Only then will you be undefeatable." Nie Tian's eyes were deep. He didn't say anything. Today, he knew too much. It was a huge blow to him, and he needed time to digest it. "Empress, I don't dare to persuade you if you don't want to return to the 10 Destruction Heavenly Prison. However, this isn't a place to stay for long. Your aura has been exposed. The people from the human emperor's palace will be here soon. We need to find a safe place." Rui Qianyu bowed slightly and said respectfully, "You still want me to return to the 10 Destruction Heavenly Prison, right?" Rui Qianyu replied indifferently. She sounded helpless. She heard the conversation between Nie Tian and Yu Jing clearly. She knew that Yu Jing didn't want to give up on bringing her back to the 10 Destruction Heavenly Prison. "Empress, I will follow your decision. But, Yu Jing slightly raised his head with a helpless expression. However, his expression suddenly changed. His old eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 42:57. In the room, Yu Jing suddenly revealed a shocked expression. Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu immediately became nervous. "Elder Yu, who's here?" Nie Tian suppressed the fear in his heart, but his voice was clearly trembling. He had already guessed the answer from Yu Jing's reaction. He just did not want to admit it, or rather, he was unwilling to admit it. "The human emperor's palace," Yu Jing said word by word with a deep look in his eyes. "I knew it." Nie Tian's eyes flickered and his heart tightened. Rui Qianyu did not have much of a reaction, but she could not hide the panic in her eyes. On the other hand, Yu Jing quickly calmed down and said in a deep voice, "What will come will come. Since we can't avoid it, we can only face it head-on." As he spoke, he gestured for Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu to stay behind. He was about to leave. "Elder Yu, you've already said that we can't avoid it. What's the point of us hiding here?" Nie Tian took a step forward and said, "I'd like to see just how powerful the people from the human emperor's palace are." Yu Jing frowned and glanced at Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu. He eventually nodded. He also knew that Rui Qinyu could not hide, so he might as well face it head-on. The three of them walked out of the room and arrived at the plaza outside the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Su Qing could not help but ask worriedly when he saw Nie Tian and the others' expressions as if they were facing a great enemy. "Nie Tian, what happened?" "Brother Su, quickly send someone to send Li Yu away. It might not be safe here," Nie Tian whispered when he suddenly thought of Li Yu's identity. Since the human emperor's palace targeted everyone who was a threat to them, Li Yu might be seen as a threat too. "It's not safe." Su Qing frowned. He clearly did not understand. This was the Myriad Yuan Pavilion in Bloodwing City. Why would it not be safe? Although the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was not a peak faction in the All-Heaven Sacred World, it was definitely one of the few peak factions. There were only a handful of factions in the entire All-Heaven Sacred World that dared to challenge the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Su Qing did not understand what Nie Tian was afraid of. He didn't know much about Nie Tian, but he could tell that the latter wasn't a coward. He was even a little curious. What kind of person could make Nie Tian so nervous? "Brother Su, trust me. Hurry up and send Li Yu away," said Nie Tian as he looked at Su Qing. "All right." Su Qing was stunned for a moment before realizing the seriousness of the matter. He nodded and turned around to make arrangements. However, right at this moment, he felt a suffocating pressure being transmitted over, causing him to involuntarily turn around and look towards the sky. As far as his line of sight could see, a black-clothed figure stood like a towering mountain, with a powerful aura that deterred the heavens and earth. What a powerful aura! Nie Tian stared at that person in shock. The man's aura was much stronger than that of the 5 presidents and the Emperor's angel. He was even more terrifying than Zhu Rushuang, and not much weaker than the 4 experts, including the Sun God Sword Emperor. After the figure's arrival, the surrounding void was under an extremely heavy pressure. The heavens and earth lost their color, and the wind and clouds surged as if a storm was brewing. Nie Tian, who is he?" Su Qing's eyes flickered, and he could not help but look at Nie Tian. Although he was trying his best to remain calm, his voice could not help but tremble. "Arrange for Li Yu to leave," said Nie Tian in a deep voice instead of explaining. Su Qing came back to his senses, nodded, and turned around to walk into the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. The person in the sky did not pay attention to Su Qing. Instead, he focused all his attention on Rui Qinyu. His eyes were cold and gloomy, filled with dense killing intent. Then, his figure moved and slowly descended. Nie Tian immediately felt the pressure in the surrounding space increase, causing his breathing to quicken. Nie Tian, step back. At this moment Yu Jing's voice was heard. Like the spring breeze and rain, it melted the pressure in the void. He then took a step forward and stood in front of Nie Tian and Rui Qinyu. The black-clothed figure in the air finally noticed Yu Jing and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. "I was wondering who it was. So it's the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master." Yu Jing smiled and said calmly, "Heaven Dao Pavilion Master." Nie Tian exclaimed in his heart when he heard the name. He did not expect the person to be the Pavilion Master of the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. Previously, Yu Jing mentioned that the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion, the 5 academies, and other forces were under the control of the Human Emperor Palace. However, the arrival of the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master was still unexpected. The Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion was the most powerful force in the All-Heavens Sacred World, so it was not surprising that the Pavilion Master was so powerful. After knowing the identity of the Pavilion Master, Nie Tian's expression changed. He knew that Donghuang Zhengrong's death was directly related to the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. "Brother Yu Jing, long time no see." The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master lowered his body and stood dozens of meters in the air before he finally spoke. His voice was hoarse, but it was powerful and oppressive. "It's been hundreds of thousands of years since we last met. I didn't expect that we would be enemies when we met again." Yu Jing smiled and seemed helpless. "Yes." The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master sighed and said, "Back then, we were both Hidden Sky warriors, and we fought for the title of the Hidden Sky Champion many times." "Old friend, you must be joking." Yu Jing nodded and said, "Back then, you were the Hidden Sky Champion and I was only ranked second. I overestimated myself and challenged you 9 times in a row, but I failed every single time." The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master twitched his lips and said, "I'm surprised that you remember it so clearly. The past is still vivid in my mind. I can't forget it." Yu Jing sighed, but there was a rare sharpness in his eyes. He could tell that the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master was reminding him of the past. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master's meaning was clear. "Yu Jing, you were no match for me back then, and you are no match for me now. So stop struggling." When Ye Tian heard what the two of them said, he was puzzled. He didn't expect Yu Jing and the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master to be so close. He didn't expect them to be from the same generation. However, Yu Jing looked old and weak, while the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master looked like a middle-aged man who was in his prime. The lifespan of a warrior was related to his cultivation and bloodline. Normally, the higher the cultivation and the stronger the bloodline, the longer the lifespan. However, the lifespan of warriors of the same level shouldn't be too different. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master and Yu Jing used to be ranked first and second on the Hidden Sky roll. Even if there was a difference in their power, it shouldn't be too big. Why were their lifespans and appearances so different? Nye Tian guessed that if the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master didn't cultivate a technique that could extend his lifespan, it could be that Yu Jing's blood qi was deteriorating too quickly, causing him to age faster than his peers. Chapter 42-58. Yu Jing looked calm, but as soon as he finished speaking, a powerful aura exploded from his body and shook the surrounding space. Nye Tian and Rui Qianyu were both shocked and immediately retreated. Yu Jing looked old, but when his aura exploded, it was extremely terrifying. It was almost as powerful as the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master. The Heaven Dao Pavilion Master stood in mid-air and frowned. He shook his head and said, "Brother Yu Jing, why do you have to do this?" He looked at Yu Jing with disdain. To him, this battle was completely unnecessary. Yu Jing was merely putting up a last-ditch struggle. "Yun Tian, you're too confident." Yu Jing smirked and rose into the air. Thousands of vines appeared behind him and kept growing like dancing snakes. Yun Tian was the name of the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master. However, ever since he became the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master, no one had called him by this name for a long time. Yun Tian was not offended by Yu Jing calling him by his name. Instead, he felt a sense of familiarity. He smiled and said, "Brother Yu Jing, you haven't changed at all." "You haven't changed either. You're still so talkative." Yu Jing sneered and struck out with his palm. Immediately, the 10,000 vines went berserk and pressed toward Yun Tian. Countless thorns appeared in mid-air and came at him. Nye Tian was shocked when he felt the power contained in the vines. Yu Jing was definitely more powerful than the 5 Deans. If he was an ordinary sky martial saint ancestor, he would have been killed by the vines. "Brother Yu Jing, it's been hundreds of thousands of years since we last met. You've improved a lot. Unfortunately, you can't hurt me." Yun Tian's arrogant voice was heard in the sky. Then, a terrifying bolt of purple lightning appeared and exploded like a pillar in the sky. It split open and formed a huge purple lightning net that enveloped Yu Jing. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, wherever the purple thunder net passed, the vines were torn apart and directly collapsed in the void. Yu Jing's eyes darkened. He quickly retreated a few hundred meters before he managed to stabilize himself. He looked terrible. He did not expect Yun Tian to be so powerful. The two of them had not seen each other for hundreds of thousands of years. During this long period of time, Yu Jing had improved, and so had Yun Etian. The reason why those peak martial arts experts were stronger than martial artists of the same level was mainly because they could maintain a steady increase in their strength. However, the vast majority of martial artists, especially those with a lifespan of more than 1,000,000 years, began to decline in strength. Yu Jing and Yun Etian were both warriors with powerful bloodlines. Even though they were millions of years old, they could still maintain their strength and even improve. "Brother Yu Jing, we are old friends. There is no need to make such a big fuss," Yun Etian shouted. "I believe that Brother Yu Jing is a smart man. Why do you have to do something that is impossible?" "What a joke," Yu Jing growled. "Yun Etian, do you really think you are invincible?" The more arrogant Yun Etian was, the more he hated him. "Of course, I'm not the strongest in the heavens, but I'm more than capable of defeating you." Yun Etian smiled faintly, showing off his superior attitude. Although he was courteous to Yu Jing on the surface, in his eyes, Yu Jing was just a defeated opponent and was not worthy to be his enemy. "Is that so?" Yu Jing sneered again. 10,000 vines reappeared behind him, violently forming a giant hand. It was as large as a mountain and pressed down on Yun Etian. Yun Etian, however, was not afraid at all. A bolt of purple lightning appeared behind him and split the giant hand, forcing Yu Jing to retreat again. Yu Jing steadied himself, but there was blood at the corner of his mouth and his face was pale. It was only then that he truly felt the difference in strength between him and Yun Etian. "Brother Yu Jing, it's been hundreds of thousands of years. You're getting worse and worse," Yun Etian said in a low voice with a smirk. Victory was in his grasp. Yu Jing's wrinkled face turned green and red, looking very ugly. However, he did not give up. Instead, the energy in his body exploded again. The vines spread madly, forming a sea of trees in the air. "I am tired of this battle. Let's call it a day." Yun Etian smiled faintly. Purple lightning surged in his palm and condensed into 10,000 bolts of lightning, forming a terrifying thunder beast. Its roar shook the sky and pierced through the clouds. "Oh no!" Nye Tian frowned, thinking that this was bad. Actually, Yu Jing's strength was not much weaker than Yun Etian's. It was just that their strengths countered each other. Yu Jing was a wood elemental martial artist, while Yun Etian was a thunder elemental martial artist. The latter was the natural enemy of the former. "Elder, you can't hold on much longer," Rui Qianyu said in a low voice. She could tell that something was wrong as well. Nye Tian glanced at Rui Qianyu and could not help but regret asking Yu Jing to take her away just now. However, Yun Etian was too fast. Even if Rui Qianyu left with Yu Jing, they would probably be stopped halfway. The problem now was, once Yu Jing was defeated, who else would be able to protect Rui Qianyu? Yun Etian's strength was beyond imagination. In Nye Tian's impression, only super powerhouses like the Yang God Sword Emperor or Hyakuten could stop him. Other than a powerhouse like the Yang God Sword Emperor, there might be another person who could stop Yun Etian, Zhu Rushuang. Unfortunately, Zhu Rushuang had yet to recover from the previous battle. Even if she had recovered, she would not be able to appear here immediately. "Let's end this." At that moment Yun Etian moved. With a palm strike, the purple thunder beast pounced at Yu Jing. Yu Jing frowned. His eyes trembled as he made a decision in an instant. The forest behind him surged and thorny tentacles extended, attempting to stop the thunder beast. However, the thunder beast was unusually fierce. Wherever it passed, the thorny tentacles were crushed. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived before Yu Jing. "Good timing." Yu Jing sneered at the thunder beast. Blood qi surged from his body and turned into a fountain of blood, dyeing the forest red. Bang! Then, before the thunder beast could even react, the blood-colored vines enveloped the thunder beast, layer by layer, and killed it. Huh! The sudden change made Yun Etian's expression change. "You're willing to sacrifice your life for the 10 annihilations of the evil woman. How could he not see that Yu Jing had burned his blood qi and the absolute martial intent in his body to create such a terrifying blood-colored vine? Yun Etian, I may not be able to defeat you, but I can trap you. At that moment Yu Jing's voice was heard. An endless sea of vines appeared, enveloping Yun Etian like an ocean. Damn it! Yun Etian reacted immediately, but it was too late. He roared in anger. This was the imprisonment array that Yu Jing had created at the cost of his life. It did not threaten his life, but it could trap him for a long time. Chapter 42:59. Senior Yu. Nie Tian's heart was pounding as Yu Jing's last words echoed in his ears. He did not expect Yu Jing to sacrifice his life to hold the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master back by burning his true will to protect Rui Qianyu. Elder Yu. Rui Qianyu did not expect Yu Jing to be so determined to protect her. She frowned and was moved. In the sky, the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master was trapped by Yu Jing's blood-colored vines and could not escape. Ruyu, let's go. Nie Tian knew that they did not have much time. With the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master's strength, the blood-colored vines would not be able to trap him for long. Therefore, they had to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would be letting Yu Jing down. Rui Qianyu looked at the blood-colored vines that were slowly disintegrating. She finally nodded and left with Nie Tian. The two of them were extremely fast. After leaving Bloodwing City, they headed east towards the nearest net of the Holy World. They had to hurry because the net of the Holy World was also controlled by the Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion. It would probably be closed soon. After running for about 3 hours, the two of them arrived at the nearest network of the net of the Holy World. Wait a minute. Rui Qianyu wanted to go there directly but was stopped by Nie Tian. What's wrong? Rui Qianyu frowned and asked anxiously. Nie Tian looked from afar and observed carefully. The people in the net of the Holy World were queuing up slowly. Everything seemed normal, but he felt that something was amiss. Let's take a look first, Nie Tian said after thinking for a while. Okay. Rui Qianyu nodded and tried to hide her aura to prevent being discovered. She did not know how the Heaven Dao Pavilion Master found her. Therefore, she could only hide her aura as much as possible. Let's go. After watching for a while, Nie Tian did not notice anything unusual and said softly. Ruoyu nodded and the two of them prepared to enter the net of the Holy World. Nie Tian. However, right at this moment, a strange voice suddenly rang out, causing Nie Tian's body to stop abruptly. He was quite shocked. He heard very clearly that this voice belonged to none other than Qing Qi. Follow me. Qing Qi's voice rang out again, but his figure did not appear. Nie Tian nodded and immediately caught a breath. He pulled Rui Qianyu and followed it. Following this aura, the two of them quickly entered a mountain range and arrived at a remote valley. Senior. Nie Tian sensed that Qing Qi was in the valley and called out. Then, a stream of light appeared and Qing Qi's figure landed. He looked a little nervous, but he quickly came to Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu's side. After making sure that both of them were fine, he was a little relieved. Senior, why are you here? Nie Tian felt a sense of familiarity when he saw Qing Qi. He felt much more at ease and asked happily. I already know what happened in Bloodwing City. I guessed that you would come here, so I waited for you in advance, Qing Qi said, sighing as he looked at Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded slightly. It seemed that Qing Qi had just returned to Bloodwing City and used some other method to quickly arrive here to wait for them. Senior, Rain and I are in danger right now. We need to find a safe place. Nie Tian took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Since the Heavenly Dao Sacred Pavilion has their eyes on you, they will definitely not let you off so easily. Qing Qi frowned and said, but the Heavenly Dao Sacred Pavilion's influence is spread across the heavens. To find a safe place is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. You saw that just now. The net of the sacred world has already been sealed. Those people are just waiting for you to catch them. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but gasp. He had vaguely sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't expect it to be so dangerous. The Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion's reaction was much faster than he had expected. I have some teleportation scrolls, but I can't teleport you to another world, Qing Chi sighed and asked. Nie Tian, do you have any place to take refuge in? Nie Tian thought for a while and nodded. I have 2 places in mind. One is the ancestral dragon's abyss of the dragon race, and the other is the ancestral land of the 4 ancient sacred clans. Since the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion had their eyes on them, there was basically no place for them to stay in the All Heavens sacred world. The ancestral dragon's abyss was more secluded, and with Zhu Rushuang guarding it, it was barely a safe place. The ancestral land of the ancient sacred clan should be safe as well. After all, Nie Tian was the high priest of the 4 ancient sacred clans. However, he wasn't sure if the Firmament Emperor had broken free from the Heavens Tablet. If the Firmament Emperor had already been reborn, going to the ancestral land of the ancient sacred clan would be akin to walking into a trap. Furthermore, he didn't know how to contact the ancient sacred clans. I heard that something big happened to the dragon race recently, and the ancestral dragon's abyss might not be safe either. As for the ancestral land of the 4 ancient sacred clans, it won't be easy to enter it. Qing Chi frowned, as if he was thinking about something. Senior, do you know about amorous affair? At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly thought of something and asked with a trembling gaze. Romance. Qing Chi frowned and his expression turned ugly. How could Nie Tian still be thinking about amorous affair at a time like this? In his opinion, Nie Tian wasn't someone who would indulge in pleasure. Senior, amorous affair should be a person or an organization. Seeing Qing Chi's reaction, Nie Tian knew that Qing Chi had misunderstood, so he quickly explained. Yu Jing had mentioned amorous affair before his death, asking Nie Tian to bring Rui Qinyu to look for amorous affair. At that time, Nie Tian was shocked by Yu Jing's death, so he didn't pay much attention to it. Now that he thought about it, he naturally had to clarify things. Then, he didn't hide anything and directly told Qing Chi about the human emperor's palace. After listening to Nie Tian, Qing Chi's eyes were filled with anger and hatred other than shock. After a while, he said in a cold tone, "Back then, when Lord Donghuang died mysteriously, I suspected that there was a bigger force behind the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion. All these years, I've investigated a lot in secret. All along, I thought that the human emperor's palace was just a legend. I didn't expect it to really exist. Senior Donghuang's death should be the doing of the human emperor's palace," Nie Tian said solemnly. Qing Chi nodded and calmed down. He tried hard to recall, but he couldn't recall anything related to amorous affair. Since Yu Jing was willing to die to protect Rui Qianyu, his words naturally couldn't be doubted. He asked Nie Tian to bring Rui Qianyu to look for amorous affair, which meant that it was a force that could go against the human emperor's palace, or a person or force that could escape the pursuit of the human emperor's palace. However, even with Qing Chi's vast knowledge, he had no idea what amorous affair was. If even Senior doesn't know what amorous affair is, then it's going to be troublesome, Nie Tian sighed when he saw Qing Chi's troubled expression. Perhaps there's someone who knows, Qing Chi said solemnly. Chapter 4260. Nie Tian's gaze changed when he heard Qing Chi mention the all-ghost ancestor. His surprise was mixed with some joy. He was obviously no stranger to the all-ghost ancestor. Most of his understanding of Donghuang Jingrong came from the former. He had even fought against the former in the Hidden Dragon competition not long ago. The all-ghost ancestor had once been sealed by Donghuang Jingrong. He broke out of the seal due to a chance encounter, but he was reborn as a primordial ghost fetus. He had no choice but to possess a ghost called the left head. As a result, the all-ghost ancestor had never defeated Donghuang Jingrong in his life, so he feared and hated the latter. After meeting Nie Tian, He naturally transferred his fear and hatred to the latter. He even wanted to compete with the latter again. That was why Nye Tian was so surprised when Qing Chi mentioned the all-ghost ancestor. You know about the all-ghost ancestor? Qing Chi could not help but frown when he saw Nye Tian's reaction. He never thought that Nye Tian would know so many people at such a young age. Nye Tian smiled faintly and told him about how he knew the all-ghost ancestor. Qing Chi was dumbfounded when he heard that. He only reacted after a long while. He had heard that the all-ghost ancestor had returned to the all-heaven sacred world, but he never thought that it was Nye Tian who had released him. Senior, does the all-ghost ancestor really know about amorous affair? Nye Tian looked at Qing Chi and asked with some uncertainty. Qing Chi returned to his senses and sighed. Since amorous affair could resist the human emperor's hall, it must be someone from a very long time ago. No one knows how long the all-ghost ancestor has lived in this world. If there's someone who knows about amorous affair, it can only be him. Yes. Nye Tian nodded. It seemed that Qing Chi was also uncertain and was only guessing. He then asked, Senior, how do we find the all-ghost ancestor then? The saint's net of the entire all-heaven sacred world was probably sealed now. Even if it wasn't sealed, it would still thoroughly investigate Nye Tian and the others. It would be almost impossible for them to leave. If we can't take the open path, we can only take the secret path, Qing Chi said after a moment of silence. Secret path. Nye Tian was stunned, but before he could ask more, Qing Chi had already stood up. He and Rui Qinyu quickly followed. After leaving the mountain range, Qing Chi and Nye Tian, Rui Qinyu and Qi began a long journey. 7 days later, the three of them came to a deep river in the extreme north of the everlasting sacred world. Looking down at the river, Nye Tian couldn't help but ask, Senior, what is this place? For the past 7 days they had been hurrying on their way. Qing Chi hadn't said anything along the way, which made him very curious about what the secret path was. The ghost crossing the blood river. Qing Chi's eyes darkened as he slowly descended to the air less than 100 meters above the river. Tian. He felt even more curious. Qi Wen Qi Tian Chen Ghost. Ghost Tian was. Ghost, however, the river below was very strange. It was as deep as an abyss and the water was very dark. Even with Nye Tian's eyesight, he could only see up to 5 or 6 meters below the water's surface. What was even more strange was that there seemed to be something swimming under the river. It was dark red and seemed to be a snake. To be precise, it's a tributary of the ghost. Qing Chi didn't care about Nye Tian's expression. He nodded and explained, rumor has it that the ghost is the origin of the ghost race. It's called the Mother River by the ghost race. A very long time ago, before the all-heaven sacred world had split and was still a single entity, the ghost-crossing blood river meandered above the all-heaven sacred world and circled around it. After the all-heaven sacred world split, the tributaries of the ghost-crossing blood river spread across the all-heaven sacred world. The ghost-crossing blood river is very mysterious. Its water contains some kind of power. Even if the tributaries and the main stream are split, they can still sense each other. Therefore, every tributary of the ghost-crossing blood river has a mysterious ghost-crossing bridge. As long as you step on the ghost-crossing bridge, you can directly enter the mainstream. Nye Tian immediately understood and couldn't help but ask, isn't the ghost-crossing bridge similar to the net of saints? Yes. Qing Chi nodded. We need to enter the ghost-crossing blood river and find the ghost-crossing bridge. Then, we can enter the mainstream and directly reach the southern sacred world. The ghost race's experts live in the southern sacred world. Nye Tian's eyes lit up as he nodded vigorously. All right. Nye Tian, you must follow me when we enter the ghost-crossing blood river. Qing Chi, on the other hand, became nervous and said, the ghost-crossing blood river is not an ordinary river. It contains a terrifying ghost power. Very few people can withstand it outside of the ghost race. This ghost power is very oppressive. Yes. Nie Tian nodded. He glanced at Rui Qianyu, but the latter did not care. Then, the three of them entered the ghost crossing Blood River without hesitation. The moment he entered the Blood River, Nie Tian sensed a terrifying, monstrous force assaulting him from all directions. It was as if a giant, invisible hand was trying to crush him to pieces. However, his martial body was strong. He could withstand the ghost power's oppression with a slight shake of his body. Rui Qianyu was also relaxed with a calm expression. On the other hand, Qing Qi's old face was slightly red. He seemed to be struggling. Nie Tian immediately understood that this ghostly energy had an extremely strong perception ability. Martial artists of different cultivation bases would also feel different pressure from the ghostly energy. He and Rui Qianyu had lower cultivation levels, so the oppression was naturally lower. Qing Qi's cultivation level was higher, so the oppression was higher. Qing Qi saw that Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu were fine and immediately understood. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Just now, he was worried about Nie Tian and Qing Qi, but now it seemed that he should be worried about himself. The three of them slowly sank into the Blood River. Because of the ghost power, their vision was very narrow. They could only see tens of meters ahead. This Blood River was very vast. The three of them searched underwater for a long time without finding anything. The longer they stayed in the Blood River, the stronger the ghost power oppression on their martial bodies. Nie Tian and Rui Qianyu were fine, but Qing Qi's face was tense. It was obvious that he couldn't hold on much longer. "Senior, are you okay?" Nie Tian saw that Qing Qi couldn't hold on anymore and asked. "I'm fine." Qing Qi held on and nodded. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't look good. With their speed of searching, who knows how long it would take to find the ghost crossing bridge. On one hand, the ghost crossing Blood River was too big and their vision was too narrow. It was very difficult to search. On the other hand, they had no understanding of the ghost crossing bridge. Even if they found it by luck, they might miss it. "Senior, we can't keep searching like this. Let's go back to the surface." Nie Tian saw that Qing Qi couldn't hold on anymore and said. Chapter 4261. Be careful. Faced with the sudden attack, Nie Tian was the first to react. He shouted and rushed to the front. The energy in his body surged, and he forcefully opened a barrier that enveloped the three of them. Boom! The ghost waves crashed into them, and after a series of roars, they gradually dissipated. What a strong force! Qing Qi felt the pressure around him weaken, and couldn't help but exclaim. He felt like he had just survived a disaster. It was indeed very dangerous just now. If it wasn't for Nie Tian stepping forward in time, even if he didn't die, he would have been seriously injured. Under the pressure of the ghost crossing Blood River, he couldn't release his energy, so he was not as strong as Nie Tian in the face of such an attack. "Nie Tian, are you okay?" Rui Qianyu exclaimed and stepped forward to support Nie Tian. Qing Qi frowned and saw that Nie Tian's face was pale and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he was seriously injured. Nie Tian took a deep breath and his complexion turned slightly better. He said solemnly, "I'm fine. The force just now was extraordinary. We must leave this place as soon as possible." Qing Qi nodded and without hesitation, he dashed towards the water surface. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom! A terrifying ghost wave appeared and pressed down from above their heads, swallowing everything in its path. Oh no! Qing Qi felt the tyrannical pressure on his face, and he couldn't help but be startled. His face became stiff as he thought that something was wrong. In his current state, if he were to face this ghost wave head-on, he would most likely die a horrible death. At the critical moment, a figure appeared. Undercurrents surged around him, and he forcefully withstood the ghost wave's attack. Miss Rui Qianyu. Qing Qi originally thought it was Nie Tian, but when he saw that it was Rui Qianyu, he couldn't help but exclaim, "I'm fine." Rui Qianyu steadied herself and didn't turn around. She only replied in a low voice. However, Qingqi could sense that Rui Qianyu was severely injured. The ghost wave just now was even more terrifying than before. Even if Nie Tian were to resist it, he would definitely be seriously injured. Rui Qianyu's martial body was not as strong as Nie Tian's, so her injuries would definitely be more serious. Charge out! Nie Tian sensed the urgency of the situation. He let out a low roar and rushed to the front like a flying fish, rushing straight into the water. Rui Qianyu and Qingqi followed closely behind, feeling much less oppressive. The three of them were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they had already traveled several thousand meters and were about to reach the surface of the water. But at this moment, Nie Tian felt that something was wrong. It was as if the pressure from above was getting stronger and stronger, making it difficult for him to move an inch. Why did the pressure suddenly increase? Qingqi also noticed this and could not help but ask. Nie Tian didn't answer. He just kept rushing forward. Ah! But at this moment a scream was heard. Nie Tian's heart tightened. He immediately turned around and saw that Qingqi's figure had disappeared. He suddenly turned around and saw Qingqi's figure on the other side. He was falling continuously, as if he was being pulled by a terrifying suction force, like an invisible hand, pulling him underwater. Nie Tian. Immediately afterwards, Raindrop Thousand Leaves let out a cry of alarm, and her body sank straight into the ground. Nie Tian reacted quickly. He reached out to grab Rui Qianyu's hand, but his body trembled and sank down as well. At this moment, Nie Tian felt the terrifying power firsthand. He was shocked. It was as if they had been sucked into a terrible whirlpool and were falling into the center of the whirlpool. To make matters worse, the deeper they went, the stronger the pressure of the ghost power around Nie Tian became. At this speed, they would soon be crushed to death by the ghost power in the water. Nie Tian forcefully steadied himself. He circulated the power in his body and struck out with his palm, trying to break out of the whirlpool. But before his palm energy could spread out, it was directly submerged. "Damn it!" he growled. He felt his whole body tense up. "Nie Tian, don't worry about me. Go by yourself." Rui Qianyu forcefully broke free from Nie Tian's hand and quickly sank. "Ruoyu!" Nie Tian shouted anxiously. Then, he did something shocking. He turned around and directly rushed down. Nie Tian. Rui Qianyu was shocked by Nie Tian's action and could not help but scream. Nie Tian's speed was extremely fast. Very quickly, he passed Rui Qianyu and Qingqi. His lips curled into a vicious smile and he muttered, "I want to see what exactly is causing this." Since he could not get rid of the whirlpool, he might as well rush straight into the center. The strange thing was, as he rushed, he found that the pressure of the ghost power around him had weakened. "Senior Ruoyu, follow me." This discovery made Nie Tian extremely happy, and he immediately shouted. Rui Qianyu frowned slightly. Without hesitation, she directly rushed over. "Let's do it." Qingqi hesitated for a moment. Then, he made up his mind and rushed down as well. To him, Nie Tian's actions earlier were simply crazy. But at this moment, he had no choice but to follow in his crazy footstep. Then, he found that the pressure around him was weakening. He could not help but be overjoyed and his wrinkled face bloomed with joy. Nie Tian purposely slowed down. Very soon, the three of them were close together. "Nie Tian, what is going on?" Qingqi was so excited that he could not contain himself and asked excitedly. "I don't know either." Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. He was completely stumbling upon this by accident. "This seems to be a giant whirlpool. Where does it lead to?" Qingqi calmed down a little and mumbled. Suddenly, he thought of something and exclaimed, could it be that this whirlpool is the Ghost Crossing Bridge?" Nie Tian also thought of this and exclaimed. The energy released by the whirlpool carried with it the scent of time and space. At this moment, it was as if they were in a tunnel of time and space. "There's someone up ahead." Just then, Rui Qianyu's eyes quivered and she exclaimed, "Hmm." Nie Tian's expression changed. Activating his demonic eye, he saw an indistinct black shadow below them. It was very strange. Why would there be people in a place like this? Qing Qi was shocked and he asked in astonishment. Nie Tian, on the other hand, frowned. Why did he feel that the black shadow was somewhat familiar? He suppressed his curiosity and increased his speed. Because he felt that the suction force below them was weakening at an alarming rate. If they were really in a tunnel of time and space, then the suction force was weakening. It could mean that the tunnel was closing. In the blink of an eye, the three of them had sunk for thousands of meters. They were only tens of meters away from the black shadow below them. Nie Tian's pupils shrank involuntarily as he took a closer look at the figure. Nie Tian. Right at this moment, the black figure abruptly turned around. His eyes were like sharp blades in the dark night, flickering with a cold light as he spoke in a ghastly voice. His face was exposed in front of Nie Tian's group of three, and it was surprisingly similar to Nie Tian's. Chapter 4262. When Nie Tian shouted Devil's Knight's name, his pupils suddenly shrank, and his heart jumped to his throat. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that he would meet the Devil's Knight here. Devil's Knight. Hearing this name, Qing Qi's expression suddenly changed, and he was extremely surprised. It seemed that Nie Tian had mentioned to him that this person was the darkness that was born from the star origin stone. Just like Hyakuten, the previous ninth astral emissary, Devil's Knight was the devil in Nie Tian's heart. Hyakuten's power was very similar to Donghuang Jingrong's, but it was darker. That was why it was called defying star power. It could be said to be a kind of mutated power of the stars. What was even more terrifying was that the power of defying the stars was stronger than the power of the stars, and it could allow a martial artist to grow faster. Qing Qi once said that Donghuang Jingrong and Hyakuten had fought 3 times. Even though Donghuang Jingrong won all 3 battles, the first one was easy, the second one was normal, and the third one was extremely difficult. This shows the rate at which Hyakuten is growing. Far surpassed Donghuang Jingrong. Even Donghuang Jingrong himself had said that if there was a 4th battle, he would definitely not be Hyakuten's opponent. Good and evil, accompanied by light and darkness. However, it seemed that evil was suppressing righteousness, and darkness was overshadowed by light. The reason why the star-defying power was stronger than the star power was because of the mutation. However, the aura of Hyakuten's star-defying power was similar to that of the star power, which meant that the mutation was not that big. As for Devil's Knight, there was almost no aura of the power of the stars. This didn't mean that he didn't inherit the power of the stars, but it meant that the power of the stars had undergone a subversive change in his body. The reason for this subversive change was most likely due to the fiend god nascent embryo in Nie Tian's body, a power that could contend against the power of the stars. Therefore, the star-defying power in Devil's Knight's body was stronger, darker, and more terrifying than Hyakuten's. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the future Devil's Knight would be far more powerful than Hyakuten. Nie Tian knew that from the moment Devil's Knight was born, his fate was inextricably linked, and the two of them would inevitably be entangled. However, meeting the Devil's Knight at this moment was completely unexpected. Nie Tian, you're really haunting me. Devil's Knight's eyes were cold and gloomy as he spoke eerily. At this time, his appearance had changed a little, and there was a considerable difference between him and Nie Tian. This undoubtedly meant that his independent consciousness had become stronger. In this world, there was probably no one who was willing to be someone else's clone, even if he was really a clone. Devil's Knight, why are you here? Nie Tian's figure flickered, almost coming face to face with the other party, as he asked in a deep voice. The Ghost Crossing Bridge is about to close. I advise you to put away these boring questions. Devil's Knight sneered, and then his figure moved, rushing towards a dazzling white ball of light below. It really is the Ghost Crossing Bridge. Nietion's eyes trembled violently. He called for Qing Chi and Rui Qianyu to follow, and the three of them followed Devil's Knight. Nietion, it seems that the ghost crossing bridge was opened by this guy. Qing Chi felt that the pressure around them had weakened a lot, and he secretly transmitted his voice to Nietion. Yes. Nietion nodded slightly. He could also see that they had borrowed Devil's Knight's luck. However, he did not understand why Devil's Knight would come here, and why he would open the ghost crossing bridge. Just as he was thinking, the three of them had already entered the white ball of light, and in the blink of an eye they passed through it. However, Nietion keenly sensed that the atmosphere around them had completely changed. It seemed that they had arrived at the main stream of the ghost crossing Blood River. One has to admit that it was thanks to Devil's Knight that they were able to arrive here without a hitch. Nietion, I really did not expect to see you here. Devil's Knight looked at Nietion and grinned. An eerie atmosphere surged around his body. Nietion felt the atmosphere, and his face slowly changed. Though the atmosphere was evil, Nietion could see the shadow of the astral force within it. In an instant, he understood that this was Devil's Knight's awakened against the stars. In the next moment, Nietion suddenly sensed something and asked in surprise, "You were just cultivating at the ghost crossing Blood River?" He sensed that Moye's star-defying power was somewhat similar to the ghost crossing Blood River's ghost power. It seemed that Devil's Knight was cultivating at the ghost crossing Blood River, absorbing the ghost chi from the Blood River. "You're not that stupid after all." Devil's Knight laughed. "I want to know, why did you come to the ghost crossing Blood River? Do I need to tell you?" Nietion raised an eyebrow and responded coldly. Devil's Knight smiled. "Ordinary people enter the ghost crossing Blood River because they want to cross the ghost crossing bridge. Looking at you guys in such a sorry state, if I'm not wrong, you guys are trying to avoid being hunted." "So what?" Eyebrows furrowed. He suddenly realized that Moye was much calmer than before. He didn't seem as violent as before, but rather more cunning. "Humph." Devil's Knight's lips twitched. "What a coincidence, you're also looking for the ghost ancestor." "You're also looking for the ghost ancestor?" Nietion couldn't help but frown and exclaim. The two of them were both looking for the ghost ancestor. What a coincidence. This is the main stream of the ghost crossing Blood River. Above it is the 1,000 layers of ghost domain. Ordinary people wouldn't risk coming here unless they're here for the ghost race. Devil's Knight smiled wickedly. "Nietion, maybe we can cooperate." "Cooperate?" Nietion froze for a second, then expressed his interest. "How?" "We're both looking for the ghost ancestor, but as far as I know, he's in seclusion right now and won't easily meet people. Plus, if we want to meet him, we need to find the legendary ghost city first. This is not an easy task." Devil's Knight faintly smiled. Nietion faintly smiled. Nietion frowned. He didn't think too much about it. In fact, it made sense. The ghost ancestor was the sovereign of the ghost race. Naturally, not everyone could meet him. It was easy for the ghost ancestor to meet Nietion, but it wasn't so easy for him to do the opposite. "We accept the cooperation." At this time, before Nietion could speak, Qing Chi stepped forward. Nietion glanced at Qing Chi and slightly nodded. Even if the latter didn't say anything, he would still accept Devil's Knight's proposal. He didn't know why Devil's Knight wanted to find the ghost ancestor, but since the latter could open the ghost crossing bridge, it meant that he had made a lot of preparations. Moreover, cooperating with Devil's Knight made Nietion feel an inexplicable sense of excitement. "Very well. Follow me." Devil's Knight faintly smiled, then his silhouette flickered, like a ray of black light, rushing towards the surface of the water. Nietion's group of 3 immediately followed. They were all injured. Staying underwater would be detrimental to their injuries. In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them arrived at the surface of the water. Nietion steadied himself and looked around. The scene in front of him moved him. Chapter 4263. Nietion stared at the white bones floating on the river and couldn't help but be stunned, unable to react for a long time. With so many white bones, it was likely that there were millions of people who died. These people were those who attempted to enter the Thousand Layers ghost domain. Unfortunately, most of them died on the way. Even if there were some lucky ones who entered the domain, they were killed by the ghost race and their corpses were thrown into this ghost-crossing blood river. Devil's Knight, on the other hand, was not surprised at all. He faintly said, "Thousand Layers ghost domain?" This was the second time that Nyetian heard this name from Devil's Knight's mouth. He couldn't help but frown and was very curious about what this place was. "It's right above your head." Devil's Knight smiled and raised his eyebrows. Nyetian's eyes trembled. He looked up at the sky and saw layers upon layers of black clouds rolling as if there were terrifying fierce beasts lurking within. The sky was actually covered by such thick black clouds. No wonder the surroundings were dusky. Even daytime was like night. Rumor has it that the Thousand Layers ghost domain is the ghost race's top secret place. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Even the ghost race's people need to have a certain level of strength to enter the domain. Qingqi looked at the thick black clouds above his head and sighed. "It seems that the rumor is true." Devil's Knight smiled strangely and said, "The Thousand Layers ghost domain hides the ghost race's deepest secret. Of course, outsiders are not allowed to enter." Ghost race's secret? Qingqi heard Devil's Knight's words and couldn't help but frown. He asked in astonishment, "What secret?" Devil's Knight looked at him and smiled without saying anything. Nyetian, on the other hand, furrowed his brows. He guessed that the reason Moyi appeared here was most likely because of the secret of the Ghost Clan. He was very curious about what kind of secret would make Devil's Knight so interested. "Let's go. Let's see what the legendary thousand-layered ghost domain is hiding." At this moment, Devil's Knight smiled faintly. His silhouette flickered, and like a shooting star, he shot towards the sky, directly rushing towards the thousand layers of evil spirits. Seeing this, Nyetian took a deep breath and told Qingqi and Rui Qianyu behind him, "Follow me closely." All three of them were injured, especially Rui Qianyu, who suffered the most serious injury. Although Qingqi's cultivation was the strongest among them, the pressure from the ghost energy in the ghost-crossing blood river was too great, causing his yuan meridians to be severely damaged. It would take several days for him to recover. Nyetian spread his wings and carried Qingqi and Rui Qianyu, following closely behind Devil's Knight. Soon, the four of them arrived at the foot of the Thousand Layers ghost horde. At this moment, Nyetian finally saw the truth behind the layers of black clouds. This was not a black cloud at all, but something similar to black sand. Upon a closer look, there were grains of black sand floating in the air, gathering together endlessly like dark clouds. Nyetian carefully observed the flow of the black sand. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded, reminding Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes trembled, and he immediately opened his devil's eye. At the same time, he connected with the demon fox of Eternal Night's divine sense and expanded his mental strength to the extreme, carefully perceiving the black sand. After a while, bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Devil's Knight was very calm, and did not enter directly. Instead, he looked at Nyetian, obviously waiting. About a quarter of an hour later, Nyetian finally recovered, but his eyes trembled slightly, appearing extremely shocked. "Nyetian, what did you find?" Devil's Knight frowned and asked in a low voice. "Senior, I didn't see wrong, did I?" Nyetian, however, ignored him. Instead, he turned around and looked at Qingqi. Even though he was trying his best to remain calm, his voice was clearly trembling. Qingqi's face was solemn, and he naturally knew what Nyetian was talking about. He nodded slowly and said, "This thousand layers of ghosts is indeed a big formation." Nyetian's eyes trembled violently, and the shock in his heart was perfectly written on his face. Just now, when he sensed the flow of the black sand, He could faintly see that the flow of the black sand had extremely regular changes, and the black sand sometimes gathered and sometimes dispersed, which was clearly the formation runes. However, he still did not believe it, or rather, he was hoping to get lucky, so he went to ask Qingqi, and the latter gave him a positive answer. Who would have thought that the vast and endless 1,000 layers of ghosts was actually a big formation? Qingqi's expression was also shocked, and he could not help but exclaim, "Such a huge formation is really a work of heaven and earth. You're saying that the 1,000 layers of ghosts is a big formation?" At this moment, Devil's Knight frowned and could not help but ask. "Yes," Nie Tian calmed down slightly and nodded. He could not help but look at the white bones on the river of blood below. No wonder so many people had died in the 1,000 layers of ghosts. Anyone who could make it to the 1,000 layers of ghosts had some talent and strength, but they could not pass through the 1,000 layers of ghosts. In the end, they could only become sacrifices in the 1,000 layers of ghosts. No wonder that guy warned me to be careful of the 1,000 layers of ghosts. Devil's Knight's eyes trembled slightly as he murmured. Then how can we pass through the 1,000 layers of ghosts? Rui Qinyu frowned and could not help but ask. Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly, and he looked at Qingqi. Qingqi was not very powerful. He could not even be regarded as first-rate in the All-Heaven Saints world, but his mastery over formations was definitely second to none. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was the greatest. If Nie Tian and Fat Cat worked together, they should be able to find a way to pass through the 1,000 layers of ghosts as well, but they would definitely pale in comparison to Qingqi. Qingqi took a deep breath and said, "The 1,000-layered ghost vortex is a huge formation, and it hides an endless amount of killing intent. However, it's exactly because the formation is so huge that it's not too difficult to pass through it." With that, he directly stepped in and disappeared into the 1,000 layers of ghost. Nie Tian and the others were stunned at first, but they soon returned to their senses and followed him in. The moment he stepped into the 1,000 layers of ghosts, Nie Tian could not help but change in expression. He could sense that the surrounding space was different from the outside world, as if it had been compressed. He felt like it was constricting when he was in there. "Follow me closely. Don't stray," Qingqi's voice rang out. There was a hint of excitement in his calm voice. He was a formation master, so he felt an inexplicable excitement to be in such a huge formation. Nie Tian had Devil's Knight walk behind Qingqi, then Rui Qinyu followed closely behind him. He was the last. The three of them followed behind Qingqi. They took every step carefully, not daring to be careless at all. Qingqi sensed the aura of the formation as he planned the path in his head, so he did not move very quickly. Very soon, 3 days passed. The four of them had walked through the first 100 layers of the formation. This place was known as the 1,000 layers of ghosts. Even if there were not 1,000 layers, there were at least several hundred layers. As a result, they would need at least half a month to leave the formation at their current speed if there were no accident. Chapter 4264. Watch out! Within the 1,000 layers of ghosts, Nie Tian instantly felt an oppressive aura pressing down on him. His expression immediately changed, and he cried out in alarm. Mo Yi was following behind Qingqi. His eyes flickered, and a black sword appeared in his hand. He slashed it down, forcibly breaking through the ghost face's illusory image. Seeing this, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown and go blank for a moment. He did not dare to believe that the seemingly majestic ghost face could not even withstand a single blow. Or maybe Devil's Knight was very strong? Nie Tian knew that Mo Ye's current strength wasn't weaker than his, but it couldn't be much stronger either. "It seems that someone is giving us a warning." Devil's Knight smiled and said calmly. "A warning?" Qingqi frowned and immediately understood. It's not an attack from the formation, it's from the person inside the formation. Yes. Mo Yi nodded with a touch of indifference on the corner of his mouth. "Before I came here, I heard that there are many gatekeepers in the thousand-layered ghost domain. So the warning just now must have come from one of them. Then why didn't he just kill us? Qing-Chi frowned and asked confusedly. Just now, the Qi was so strong that even a cultivator of the sky martial realm would be scared. It meant that the hidden gatekeeper was very strong. But strangely, he only warned them and didn't kill them. They are gatekeepers, not people who kill innocent people. Devil's Knight smiled and said, maybe he thinks that we are qualified to enter the thousand layers of ghosts. Qing-Chi's face darkened. He didn't think much of it. He felt that there must be something else. Devil's Knight seemed to know a lot, he just didn't want to talk about it. Then, the group calmed down and continued to move forward. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Nie Tian counted silently. They had passed the first 254 layers of the 1,000 layers of ghosts. It seemed that the deeper they went into the 1,000-layer ghost domain, the weaker the power of the formation became. For the next few days, everything was calm. Nie Tian and the others also sped up a lot. About 7 days later, they arrived at the last 100 layers of the 1,000 layers ghost web. However, the fact that things were going so smoothly made Nie Tian feel a little worried. This formation only looks huge. Once you enter it, the threat is actually not as great as an ordinary killing formation. Qing-Chi was very happy and laughed. I'm afraid not. The corners of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched strangely as he said, the real killing intent of the 1,000 layers ghost horde hasn't arrived yet. If we start to be complacent now, then there's only one thing waiting for us, death. Qing-Chi's expression stiffened. He then looked at Devil's Knight and said with a smile, I think you are a little too nervous. Obviously, his injury was not light. Nie Tian, are you okay? Qing-Chi was shocked, and hurriedly came to Nie Tian's side and asked nervously. Nie Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and shook his head slightly, but his pair of eyes stared at Devil's Knight coldly. This. Seeing Nie Tian's expression, Qing-Chi immediately understood what was going on, and couldn't utter a single word. They had encountered the same attack before, but Devil's Knight easily took it with ease. However, Nie Tian had sustained serious injuries. The gap between the two of them was obvious. Qing-Chi was very clear about Devil's Knight's identity, so he was very puzzled. Was Devil's Knight really so much stronger than Nie Tian? If the current Nie Tian was not Devil's Knight's opponent, then the gap between the two would only get bigger and bigger in the future. If you can't take it, why are you trying to be brave? Devil's Knight looked at Nie Tian, and did not panic at all, but smiled coldly. Devil's Knight, what the hell are you doing? How can you absorb the power of the 1,000 layers of evil spirit? Nie Tian's face was cold, and he no longer concealed it, and asked directly. He knew that Devil's Knight was very strong, but he did not believe that the gap between him and Devil's Knight could be so big. Oh? I can see that. Devil's Knight's mouth twitched into a smile, and looked at Nie Tian with undisguised contempt and said, If that's the case, then I might as well tell you my new identity. Chapter 4265. Young Master of the Ghost Tribe? Nie Tian's pupils shrank when he heard this title. Could it be that Devil's Knight was already a member of the Ghost Tribe? That's impossible. At this time, Qing-Chi reacted and exclaimed, You're not a member of the Ghost Tribe. How could you be the young master of the Ghost Tribe? Humph. Devil's Knight couldn't help but laugh and asked, Who said that the young master of the Ghost Tribe must be a member of the Ghost Tribe? This. Qing-Chi was stunned and couldn't speak for a while. The 1,000 Layers Ghost Domain was the most secret place of the Ghost Tribe. The strongest branches of the Ghost Tribe were all entrenched here, so the Ghost Tribe almost represented the Ghost Tribe. And the young master of the Ghost Tribe had a very high status in the Ghost Tribe. Generally, the Ghost Tribe was the next lord of all ghosts. So when Devil's Knight said he was the young master of the Ghost Tribe, Qing-Chi was so shocked. This almost meant that Devil's Knight was the next lord of the Ghost Tribe. But Ching Chi was very clear about Devil's Knight's origin. He was not a member of the Ghost Tribe, so how could he be the Lord of the Ghost Tribe? So you've been a member of the Ghost Tribe for a long time. Nie Tian calmed down a little and said in a deep voice. At this moment, he understood many things. No wonder Devil's Knight could open the Ghost Crossing Bridge, absorb power from the Ghost Crossing Blood River, and absorb power from the Thousand Layers Ghost Domain. Moreover, he could easily break the attack of the Great Formation. All of this was related to his identity as the young master of the Ghost Tribe. It seemed that Devil's Knight should have come to the Ghost Tribe a long time ago. It must not have been easy for him to become the young master of the Ghost Tribe. Yes. Devil's Knight looked at Nie Tian with a mocking expression and said, "Do you think I lied to you? Actually, no. And I think you should be grateful to me. Without me, you wouldn't have been able to come here." Nie Tian was silent for a moment and said, "You didn't bring us here just to tell us that you're the young master of the Ghost Tribe." He knew that Devil's Knight was extremely cunning and ruthless. He would never do something meaningless. "First tell me, why do you want the demon ghost?" Devil's Knight said indifferently. After a moment of pondering, Nie Tian said, "So we're here for the All-Ghosts' ancestor, the old man." Devil's Knight laughed. He then glanced at Rui Qianyu and said, "Let me guess. Did you awaken your bloodline and alerted the human emperor's palace behind the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion? They wanted to kill you, but you did it to protect yourself. That's why I'm looking for the old man." Nie Tian's heart tightened when he heard Devil's Knight's words. He didn't expect Devil's Knight to know so much. With Devil's Knight's abilities, it wasn't strange for him to sense that Rui Qianyu's bloodline was abnormal. But how did he know about the human emperor's palace? Even Nie Tian only learned about the existence of the human emperor's palace from Yu Jing not long ago. The human emperor's palace. Devil's Knight seemed to know what Nie Tian was thinking. He smiled and said, "This organization has existed since the birth of the All-Heaven Sacred World. It's impressive that they still control the entire All-Heaven Sacred World after such a long time." "How do you know about the human emperor's palace?" Nie Tian asked cold. He could no longer hold back his doubts. "Why, you can know about it, but I can't?" Devil's Knight's expression changed. He said coldly, "Is it because I'm just a copy of you in your eyes? That's why I can only live in your shadow forever? Do I have to struggle at death's door before you?" Nie Tian frowned and fell silent. When Devil's Knight first appeared, he wanted to kill Nie Tian and replace him. Nie Tian also wanted to kill Devil's Knight. But in the end, the two of them escaped from death and went their separate ways. Recently, especially with Hyakuten's appearance, Nie Tian's opinion of Devil's Knight changed slightly. He felt that while Devil's Knight was a demon in his heart and his dark side, it wasn't completely undesirable. Just like Dong Wang Jingrong. Since he spared Hyakuten's life, it meant that no matter how serious he was, Hyakuten still had value. The ultimate martial evil heaven had taken away Nie Tian's ninefold chaos beast, but at the same time, it had also pulled the Emperor's karmic ruin, Li Yuan, and the others into the primordial starry sky. Otherwise, the all-heavens sacred world would have been doomed. So no matter what Hyakuten was thinking, it was undeniable that he had saved the all-heavens sacred world. Moreover, what Nie Tian saw in Hyakuten was not pure evil. Since Devil's Knight had appeared, there was a reason for his existence. If Nie Tian really killed the current Devil's Knight, there was no guarantee that a second Devil's Knight would not appear. And Devil's Knight's attitude towards Nie Tian seemed to be born with hatred. So he wanted to kill the latter and replace him. Perhaps he just didn't want to live under another person's shadow. Or perhaps he wanted to become a complete person. At that moment, Nie Tian seemed to understand Devil's Knight's feelings. "If you don't say anything, that means you agree." Seeing that Nie Tian didn't say anything, the killing intent in Moye's eyes grew even stronger. "You must think that I shouldn't exist, and that my existence has been a mistake from the beginning to the end, don't you?" Mo Yi looked at Nye Tian and said, I've never denied your existence, and I've never considered you my subordinate. Nye Tian suddenly looked up. His eyes flickered with a strange light. You have your own independent consciousness. You have your own thoughts. You have your own vengeance and hatred. That's why you're a complete person. It's just that you're obsessed, thinking that only by killing me can you be a complete person. Isn't that so? Devil's Knight's eyes flashed fiercely. I was born because of you, so you must die because of me. Since you're the light and I'm the darkness, only one of us can live. Nye Tian frowned. After a long silence, he suddenly laughed and said, Since you insist on killing me, how about we make a bet? Bet? What bet? The corner of Devil's Knight's mouth twitched, his face cold and contemptuous. Nye Tian and the others were already in his bag. He could kill Nye Tian at any time. I'll fight you 3 times. Nye Tian's eyes shone. You and I will fight 3 times. If you can win once, I'll let you do whatever you want to me. Is that so? Devil's Knight sneered. You haven't killed me yet because you don't want to rely on other forces. You just want to kill me with your own hands. Nye Tian smiled faintly. This is the obsession in your heart. You can't let it go. If you accept the 3 fights, you and I will fight fairly 3 times. If you win once, you can kill me with your own hand. If you lose all 3 times, I won't kill you. I just want you to give up on killing me and treat me as a stranger. Humph. Devil's Knight looked at Nye Tian and couldn't help but sneer. Nye Tian, you're overconfident.